Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, May 17th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, it's Casual Friday, folks. Joining us, the host and proprietor of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Benjamin Dixon. Also on the program today, voice artist, apparently author, though arguably of the title of his book, failed musician, and voice of the Majority Report intro. Jon Benjamin will be here to discuss his forthcoming paper book version of his book. Whatever. Also on the program today, Trump tells the Pentagon he was just joking. He doesn't really want a massive conflict with Iran. Meanwhile, documents reveal that someone, quote, connected to Congress tried to convince Flynn from cooperating with the Mueller investigation. Virulent anti-choicer Wendy Vidder, the latest judge confirmed to the federal bench. Meanwhile, on the 65th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education, we now have 27 federal judges who have gone through their confirmation process, refusing to say whether they would have ruled in that same way on that case that talked about separate but equal. Nice. Meanwhile, the Government Accountability Office says Ben Carson broke the law with his HUD purchases. And the Russian GRU hacked into a Florida county voter database in 2016. We don't need to know the details. Chelsea Manning jailed for refusal to testify in front of a grand jury, facing unprecedented financial penalties as well as jail time. And in a bizarre self-own, Trump plans to release asylum seekers and immigrants in 2 Democratic districts. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Casual Friday. I am in a secondary location, being beamed into the studio. And this is, I'm in I think they call them the sandwich years. Is that what they call them? The sandwich years? Where you know
sandwiches?
That seems to be forever, I think. But the years where you don't only have your kids as as sort of like something that you got to work out, but it's also when you've got parents as well. It's a sandwich generation. So, what's that?
Lots of responsibilities.
Well, it's just it's going to involve a little bit of travel. So this something like this may happen with some increased frequency, not too much, but we have worked I think most of the kinks out. So and also just another moment of house cleaning. You can support this program by going to jointhemajority.report.com. And you can also support this program wherein you become a member. You get extra content. You get ad-free shows, and you get to support the free show. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Get the Majority Report blend. Enjoy yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Also, if you are a Chapo Trap House member, check out the episode. I think it must have dropped yesterday. They have a quick turnaround, those guys. And I was talking to Virgil Texas about Air America and just
that bastard Mark Green. I hate him.
It came up. I mean, I don't think I was like as explicit because I was a little bit self-conscious of just like his name was appropriate to mention, but then I just felt like I couldn't just say, oh God, I hate that guy.
And then the world's greatest moron, a man by the name of Mark Green, came on the scene.
That's the thing. I made a mistake insofar as I did not use the adjective. Like I just did not couple the adjective with him. But
I told Virgil you were going to spill the tea. He asked me if you would spill the tea, and I was like, I think he's going to spill the tea.
I would have spilled more tea. He just didn't ask specific questions about specific people. It just didn't, come up in the flow of the conversation.
You're saying he Rubened it?
He Rubened it a little bit.
I don't want to talk about Mark Green. I want to talk about ideas.
Speaking of ideas, so obviously the big news this week, or part of it, has been the series of anti-abortion, anti-choice laws that have been passed, really over the past 2 or 3 weeks, right? We've seen one in Ohio. We've seen one in Georgia, now in Alabama. Alabama's the most extreme one. I want to just caution people a little bit about making this exclusively about the failure to exempt women from this law and doctors from this law because of rape or incest, because the real problem is that there is any prohibition against women having sovereignty over their own body. And at the very least, I guess you could say about that law is that at least it is not, it's consistent. I mean, clearly you do not pass a law like this unless on some level you perceive a woman's role, primary role, to be an incubator for potential children. And so whether they have conceived by choice, by accident, by rape, it really is irrelevant to these people. And because they perceive women fundamentally, and I do mean that word literally, because it is a fundamentalist Christian and religious, in some religions, other religions as well, view that their primary reason for existence is to be able to have God create babies through them. And so, I see people out there critiquing the law, and obviously it from a political standpoint, it has some expediency. But I'm not convinced that, part of the idea here is one that we've seen from Republicans and conservatives for frankly, for a couple of decades, that either by design or by just simply by result, that certain things are normalized because of how extreme the Republicans and the conservatives have become in attempting to push, in some instances, their theocratic views of government upon the rest of us. And in some instances, their, I guess, equally market fundamentalist views on us as well. But we should not normalize the idea of banning abortion, even if there is an exemption for women who have been raped or are the victim of incest, or because their lives are in jeopardy. The fact of the matter is that, It is not, the fetus is not a person. And our laws govern persons. God's law may govern life, and God may have chosen to say, okay, it's okay that the four-legged life, they can be eaten. The plant life, they can be eaten. And the people who have committed certain crimes, they can be killed. And, of course, we can kill people in war. We can kill people by overcharging for medications that could prevent their death. But I'm going to intervene here. I mean, we're not responsible as a civil society to maintain the perspectives, particularly in this country. In most countries, it seems to be the case as well. But we're not responsible to maintain other people's notion of what God's law is. Other people themselves can decide if they will abide by what they perceive as God's law and whether they perceive that God exists. But we live in a civil society. Life is not protected in our society. We can just look around and see that. That is a principle. Persons are protected. And who we deem to be a person at various times has changed in our society. Right? I mean, we know that slaves were not persons 200 years ago in this country. They were sub-person. And this is what you see with the attempt with fetuses to turn them into persons. But it is problematic to do so. And that is why it's so difficult for them to pass these laws and have them work. Because when you have a person whose existence depends on another person so intimately, then all of a sudden you get conflicts that are unresolvable by civil law. So, I mean, that is, I just want to just make a note of that. It's just a bit of a pet peeve. I understand from a political perspective, it makes it, there's a certain expedience to it. But I'm afraid that it's setting up an opportunity on the Supreme Court for the compromise to be, we're going to allow exemptions for rape and incest as a federal law. But I think, there is more and more sense that the political wing of the conservative movement is going to push the judicial wing, maybe even faster than they had themselves anticipated. But we shall see. In the meantime, as the extremeness, and really this, I think, people are starting to realize, because we don't have a huge amount of people, certainly none who could get pregnant at this point, who lived in an era when abortion was illegal. And I think there are many gains that we've made in society that later generations begin to just sort of take for granted. And now I think there's starting to become a little bit more focus as we get closer to a time where, without doubt, there's going to be a continued curtailment, not just even from a practical sense, but from a legal sense of the right of women to have sovereignty over their own body. And we're starting to see the implications of that, or starting to see the, to be able to more clearly imagine the implications of that. And it's not just, obviously, that abortions are illegal in certain states. Some states are passing laws that says it's illegal to cross state lines to get an abortion. It's not just that abortions are going to be illegal, exempted with rape and incest. That's possible. That's going to go away. But also, we're going to be losing. There's also a whole host of health issues that are involved in this, because you have laws that start to say, like, well, how do we know it was an abortion as opposed to a
miscarriage.
A miscarriage, right? I mean, how if it is illegal for an abortion, but a miscarriage and an abortion look very similar in terms of the end product. You're going to start having to, as a woman, register your miscarriages. But how are you going to register miscarriages unless you register your pregnancies? I mean, there's a whole host of things that are involved in this that are going to be start coming a little bit clearer as we get closer to this moment, and maybe won't be totally clear until we get to the other side of it. In the meanwhile, there is scrambling by those on the right, because as it becomes more real for people, people start to realize how insane this vision of America is. And I think you're going to see the abortion numbers actually harden. For those people who want choice, I think you're going to see it harden and get maybe a little bit larger in terms of supporting a woman's right to choose. It may not make a difference at this point. We may have gone past the point of no return because of what's happened with the Supreme Court, but we shall see. In the meantime, here is Matt Walsh. He apparently has a show. This is not the funny Matt Walsh. This is the really unfunny Matt Walsh.
Very unfunny.
Right.
Not
there's a
good.
There's a funny Matt Walsh who was on Vice, and I think he's on another show now. A UCB
Veep.
guy. Veep, not Vice, right? Veep. And the unfunny Matt Walsh hosts the show on the center of conservative intellectualism online. That is the Daily Wire. This is the brainchild of Ben Shapiro, I believe. And here is Matt Walsh, who, what's his official title over there? Primetime host of religiosity or something? What is it?
Yeah, it is something like that. He calls himself like a writer and host and stuff like that.
Okay, here he is.
One of the religious right's most influential young voices.
Yes, okay, here it is. Here he is, okay, now trying to, in some way, I mean, look, I understand if he just comes out and says, God's law says there are no abortions, and that's why I want there to be no abortions, because I believe God's law shall reign in this country. I mean, there are theocrats. They exist. I disagree with them. I think it's fundamentally un-American, but at least they can come out with it. But this is stunning. His attempt to come up with another more practical argument about why there shouldn't be an exemption for rape.
Now, as for the cases of rape, which are rare and in a very small minority, but as for them, there are two things to keep in mind.
Pause it.
Number one.
What? But the cases of rape? Or what is he saying? The cases of rape that lead to pregnancy are rare? Is that what he's saying? I'm not sure I understand even what the point is. He just wants to minimize rape just generally. All right, continue.
Now, as for the cases of rape, which are rare and in a very small minority, but as for them, there are two things to keep in mind. Number one, abortion helps rapists cover up their crimes. Rapists love abortion. Rapists love Planned Parenthood is a rapist's best friend, because when a rapist rapes someone and creates a baby, most of the time.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. He pauses there. Do you think that he just sort of stumbled onto that talking point and was like, "Oh, damn it"? I'm afraid that came out of my mouth, because it sounds like he's just not sure where to go.
No, I think that we still sometimes, at least I do, have the we just got to unlearn it of like wanting to give people like this even like 1% credit. So there is like hey, did he just realize that what he's saying is absolutely demented?
Yeah, no, he planned it this way.
Yeah, no, I bet. Planned or not, I'm sure he does not get that it was demented.
Okay, all right. Wait, so you go back just a little bit. Go ahead.
When a rapist rapes someone and creates a baby, most of the time that's not what they had in mind. They weren't trying to create a baby. And if this is what here the people that are coming up with these hard case hypotheticals, well, what if a 13-year-old girl is raped and now she's forced to carry her baby? Well, if a 13-year-old girl is pregnant, that's a very good indication that probably a crime occurred. And once you have the baby,
Probably.
you can do a DNA test and find out who the father is. And if that father is an adult, then that person is going to jail. So now we can prove that a rape occurred. That's why rapists would rather just send the victim off to Planned Parenthood, have the pregnancy taken care of, and the evidence thrown into a medical waste dumpster.
Is this guy completely out of his mind? Is he not aware that an aborted fetus would have DNA as well? I mean, just assuming like his entire scenario in his mind would be like, how are we going to find out? He also apparently doesn't, I mean, I guess theoretically, this rapist or this victim of the victim of incest, right? They would take DNA from everyone around her. Is that what his plan is? But if they were to do that, he's not aware that the fetus has DNA. That the reason why we would force, in his words, in his scenario, a 13-year-old girl to carry a rapist's baby to term is because there's no other way to prove that this 13-year-old was raped, that this 13-year-old would rather have this child so as to have ironclad proof, which could be presented even by I mean, I don't understand. Like, does he have no editor? Do they not have sit around and talk to other people and say, hey, wait a second, I have a crazy idea. I want to bounce this off you.
Well, remember
he
when
talks to the cool kids philosopher, Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, remember when the Daily Wire did that Columbus Day animation that was really racist? And
Right.
Ben Shapiro's like, I was actually out of office that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this
I was
guy's-
on my 4th birthright trip.
He's not speaking to convince anyone. He's speaking to whip up his already quite frenzied base, right?
But I don't understand. Like, don't they realize that other people are going to see this? Do they think that all of the people that follow them are just complete morons?
I mean yeah. They don't
They
care.
They must. I mean, I would like to. We will be taking calls later in the program. If you're someone who for a while thought like, hey, that is a good idea. We should make rape victims carry a fetus to term and force their pregnancy, force their birth, so that we can have evidence to convict the rapist. And that's the only way we'd be able to do that. If you're one of those people who for a moment or even still believe it, make sure you call in later in the program. In the meantime, one of today's sponsors is Skillshare. And anyone who goes to skl.sh, Majority Report 3, is going to get 2 whole months of totally free access to Skillshare's entire library, super quality online courses and tutorials. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community that offers courses on everything from design to video editing, photography, businesses, technology, cooking, meditation, everything in between. There are Skillshare courses for everybody. You'll have no problem finding courses that are going to be useful to you both in your personal life and your professional life. Whether you want to sharpen your skills with something you already love doing or you want to learn how to do something totally new, Skillshare has you covered. They have courses for entrepreneurs, courses on computer coding, web development, personal nutrition, learning new languages, Photoshop, you name it. And not on this list, taking a professional style photo with your camera. Not with your camera, with your phone. My photo mojo has improved significantly in the past couple of days. What, are you putting music on for that?
Oh, no, that was just for me.
Oh, okay.
Should have.
But they also have classes on entrepreneur. I mean, all sorts of stuff. It's great. And you get 2 entire months of free access to every single course offered by Skillshare by going to skl.sh/Majority Report 3. Just think of everything you're going to have at your fingertips for 2 whole months. Again, that's skl.sh/Majority Report 3. I put a link underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube, same as in the podcast description. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Ben Dixon. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the proprietor and the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, Ben Dixon. Ben, welcome to the program.
Sam, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
So, all right, let's talk about this. We were just, I just played a clip of Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire. Yes, I know, glutton for punishment, and he was arguing that one of the upsides of forcing a victim of rape to carry a pregnancy to term, particularly if they're age 13. Is that you're going to have proof by taking DNA from the baby that who the rapist is. Now, apparently, he's not aware that you can do that from a fetus as well. But that aside, what do you make of this? I mean, we've seen this. Let me ask you that. Let me start with this question. It seems to me that the pace of this is happening faster than I would have anticipated. I mean, just coincidentally, two weeks ago, we had on Robin Marty, who wrote a book, The Handbook for a Post-Roe America. And I think she's anticipating, and I certainly anticipated, that we were talking more about like a 2022 type of situation, 2021. But it feels like that this might come up. Some of these cases are going to, the Supreme Court is going to have to make a decision about these cases as to whether to hear them. It seems to me by this time next year, they could be deliberating these cases.
Right. And I guess my question, they may be deliberating them. Do you think that they'll get a decision out before the actual election, though? I think conservatives have taken this in consideration. And I think a part of it is obviously a concerted effort across the country, right? This is their playbook. This is what they've been waiting for. This is the big score for a very small portion, but a very vocal and a very well-funded small minority of the conservative base that wants to overturn Roe. And they've been planning this since, I guess, 1973. They've been planning and laying the foundation for this, and it's served them well politically. And now they've gone so far that Pat Robertson thinks they've gone too far. But, I wasn't shocked that it came back to back to back. I was really questionable about their timing. So the real question is when the Supreme Court would take it up, and if they take it up and get a decision before 2020, because that would be devastating to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I guess I got to double check on this because I'm not 100% sure when the Alabama law is supposed to go into effect. Now, presumably, like if they passed it in such a way, it does not take effect in Alabama for 6 months. Okay.
Okay.
And so you can't challenge it, it seems to me, until it's about to go into effect.
Right.
I think. And so just presuming that you can't. Once it's about to take effect, I imagine they would go and look for a stay on this, and then they would deal with it. But if it's 6 months from now, maybe that's the idea, is it's going to miss the next term of the Supreme Court, and then it would actually be 2021's term. So
exactly.
So
that was my best guess, and I didn't want to speak on it because I have really no grounding in the timing that it takes to go from law to Supreme Court. But my best guess was that they did it at this exact moment because they feel like some of the outrage, once it gets out of the nature of our news cycle, as atrocious as this is, it's very likely that it will be out of, the rage will settle down in a couple of months. And if they timed it right, it won't get a decision until after the election. So they're trying to get their cake and eat it too. I'm sure they sat there and meticulously timed this out. So if I'm thinking like a conservative and they thought this out as the dark Sith lords that they are, they timed this perfectly to have the outrage die down and not get a decision until after the 2020 election.
Well, and we should say it's not just a question of, whether the outrage dies down or not on the left. Certainly, it's going to keep that issue right in the forefront of the right.
For the right,
and it's basically going to say, like, look, and maybe that's why I don't know. Maybe that's why Clarence Thomas is. I mean, this gets into sort of all the politics surrounding Clarence Thomas too, right? Because if Clarence Thomas steps down after this term, and people should remember, the terms of the Supreme Court justices basically run from September to June or July is when they come out with their final decisions. So in the fall, they hear cases, or they determine whether they will grant cert for cases. They will listen to big cases. They can grant cert, I guess, throughout their term if they want to, but the bigger ones they will deal with in the fall, and then they will hear the oral arguments, and then they'll make decisions in June or July. And if Clarence Thomas resigns in the summer, Mitch McConnell will try and have him replaced by the fall. And then you've got 5 right-wing Supreme Court justices, all in their 40s. I think the oldest would be in like their early 50s, maybe. So they're looking at like anywhere from 30 to 40 years on the court with a 5-4 majority. That's all you would need. And then the idea would be, okay, so that's locked in. It doesn't create the same passion amongst the right for the Supreme Court, although with Roe v. Wade just sitting there, it very well might. I mean, this is the thing that I think in many respects may have won the election for Donald Trump, was that empty seat, and the idea that would not be 5-4 liberal to conservative. And but if Thomas stays on the court, that creates that dynamic of you want a conservative to replace him because he may not last another 4 or 5 years.
Right. I guess the problem is that the conservatives are extremely clear on not only their agenda, but their strategy and their ability to get in line to implement that strategy over a 40-year period. And we have a disadvantage. What's that saying? I'm not part of any organized party. I'm a Democrat.
Right.
But that saying trickles down to everything, to leftists, socialists, and far leftists. All of us have that really radical and independent spirit that really does not give us the advantage that conservatives have. I mean, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. That said, we don't really have the capacity yet, the infrastructure, the funding, or the long strategy game to counteract something like this. And the best strategy for us, I think it was Dave Ferris or Paris. I read his book, Time to Fight Dirty, and I interviewed him, is we need someone bold enough, a lot of someone's bold enough to get in there and pack the court, because we're talking about an entire generation. I mean, if I last 30 or 40 more years, we'll just now be able to undo some of the damage that Donald Trump has done in one term.
Yeah, and not to mention, he has already put more federal circuit, more judges on the federal circuit court than any other president at this point in their administration. 1 out of every 6, I think it is right now.
He's delivering. He's delivering for a very vocal, and I'm surprised at the polling. Right, I wasn't that sure that an all-out abortion ban was so unpopular, like 25%. But that is a powerful 25%. The funding that goes behind it, the organizing that goes behind it, quite literally is the backbone of the evangelical right, and gave life to the Republican Party all over again back in the 80s, the opposition to Roe versus Wade. So, I mean, that's a powerful group that he's delivering for.
Well, it's also, there is... It feels like this is like another situation almost with guns in some way, that the right seems to have like 3 issues that are of which the same people are single voter issues. Yeah. You know what I mean? Voters, single issue voters, right? Like they being against abortion and having guns seems to be like their number 1 issues. Both of them are number 1. And
tied.
That is there's 25% out there that are just like, these are the only 2 things I vote on. Everything else, I'll subscribe to, but if you tell me you're changing it next week, that's okay too. Like it used to be the deficit, guns, and abortion. And now
Right.
it's like, with the deficit, that's not that big of a deal.
And that's what I was going to say. Like everything else, like look at what they're willing to tolerate. Look at the farmers who are doing terribly now because of Trump's trade war, right? But when they get in that voting booth, the question is, are they going to vote against Donald Trump? Well, if they fall back to their single issue, no, they're going to continue to vote. So they're willing to suffer tremendously in order to get these single issue passed and to stand behind what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's they're willing to suffer. They just assume that they won't. Like they just trust Daddy will save us. It's just that we need to be punished right now, so that later we can feel better.
Yeah.
I think it's probably. I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to do some type of group psychological study on the way that people vote for Donald Trump, despite the fact. I mean, just like even the deficit thing. I'm perfectly happy to run up the deficit, although I don't know that you need to. But I'm perfectly happy to. But it's amazing how this was like literally a religion for Republicans 5 years ago, and then they just decided, I'm converting to something. I just F that. I'm going to college.
But we saw that coming, though. I mean, I think you've spoken about it plenty of times. Like it was a foil against Barack Obama. I mean, they didn't care about it when we ran it up for the wars. Actually, they didn't have it on the books, but we knew that was coming. And then we knew as soon as a Republican would get in, they would not care again. And the problem, though, is Democrats in their, I don't know what they're thinking kind of minds, they seem to actually believe that it matters. And that's where we continuously get pushed further and further to the right, not only economically, but the same thing happens on social issues. And Democrats are complicit in this, whether it's by incompetence or whether it's intentional. They are aiding and abetting this rightward push in this country.
Yeah, let's talk. I mean, I wasn't planning on touching on that theme necessarily right now, but I think it's probably worth it. What is your perspective on how the Democrats are doing right now? I mean, Nancy Pelosi seems to have all but succeeded in stifling impeachment talk.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to the Washington Post, I don't know, a day or two ago, Pelosi told Democrats to stick to policy, forget about the impeachment inquiry. There was apparently in the caucus meeting no protest. Chuck Schumer last Sunday came out with this bold move to form a bipartisan legislation to stop robocalls. Great, but that seems a little small bore, right? In this day and age, Nancy and Chuck are trying to do an infrastructure deal with Trump, which I don't. I mean, does this make any sense to you?
It makes literally no sense whatsoever. I'm not one to ascribe to the kabuki theory of the Democratic Party. I'm more prone to willful ignorance or just malpractice and incompetence. But at this point, the way they are folding and not monopolizing on the very tactics that could get them in power to do. So what if they don't want to go far left? There has to be some things that they want to do in power as Democrats, even if it's centrist, but they're not seizing on the opportunity politically. So it's political malpractice of the highest order. And I can't really wrap my head around it, but that kabuki theory keeps jumping back in my head. It's all just one big show, because to me, that might be the best way to explain the behavior, particularly of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, which makes me hope. I really hope this freshman class of Democrats don't start conforming to the establishment and can continue to buck against the entrenched power structure there.
Yeah, I can't understand. I mean, do you think it's just like they have learned the wrong lessons from a long time ago? Like what?
I honestly, I don't know, because the reality of it is like win, lose, or draw, Republicans would impeach a Democratic president in no time flat. We would be talking about the Senate trial at this point. If this was a Republican, if the roles were reversed, the parties were switched. And so win, lose, or draw, Republicans are willing to throw everything on the line for what, and it's not even for what they believe. They throw everything on the line for the smallest political win. Right. They go all in. And that's an advantage that they have over us, while we have Chuck Schumer talking about robocalls. And they're actually trying to give Donald Trump a political win. Republicans would never do this. And so, at a certain point, I get you want to be a good governor. Right. You want to have good governance. You want to serve the people. Right. But we're in such a hyper partisan era that if you are not willing to engage in the political art of war, you are going to get what we used to say around the block, mollywopped every single time you come out to play. And so the Democrats are demonstrating that they have no idea what the hell they're doing. And they're giving this away to the Republican Party over and over and over again. So, I don't have an explanation for it. I only have a hope to get these people replaced. Like Nancy Pelosi, great. It was cool that she became speaker again, and it was a momentous occasion, right? But, at this point, we really need different leadership.
Yeah.
We needed someone else in there because there's no excuse. This is a political give me. And we need that because of the type of party we're fighting against.
And because of things like the structural disadvantage we have in terms of the Senate and whatnot, in terms of just like taking the Senate back.
Exactly.
And it does feel like there's been a demobilization, right? Like people are just walking around like, I don't know what to do now.
Right.
And this whole idea that the Democrat, just waiting for the election does not make sense to me. There needs to be things done to make the situation better for you when the election shows up, right? Like election day is in November. There needs to be more things done to make Trump, to make the anger at Trump. Look, the Democrats did not run on impeaching Trump. They did not run against Trump. They ran on health insurance. But the fact of the matter is, Democrats always run on some form of health insurance, right?
Right.
Maybe more, maybe less ambitious as it goes. But at the end of the day, it was not just health insurance. It was people wanted to send a message to Donald Trump, and that, to maintain that level of fervor takes work.
Right. But check this out, Sam. This is the difference between Democrats and Republicans, right? Republicans have been able, conservatives particularly, have been able to maintain the anger and the fury behind overturning Roe versus Wade for 45 years. Democrats cannot hold the anger against Trump for 2 years, from midterm to general election of the next go round. They're not able to do it. And because they don't have the capacity to do that, we're very likely looking at a 2020 reelection of Donald Trump, when instead we could have been running up the scoreboard. Just running it up day in and day out. But instead we're stuck with feckless leadership.
Well, it's not just leadership, is it? Granted, the leadership has failed, but it's also just a function of I think. The mentality of your average Democratic voter. I think Joe Biden in the polls at this point, and I'm curious as to your perspective on that. But I think regardless of whether one thinks it's durable, there doesn't seem to be intensity for Joe Biden. There seems to be basically broad consensus that he's the best chance to beat Trump. I don't happen to agree with that, and I'm just saying in terms of the polls. But everybody who reports on why people are interested in Joe Biden, it just comes down to he's the best chance to win. That seems problematic. To choose,
yeah, right. That's what was Chomsky's piece on consent, manufacturing consent. They manufactured that consent right there, right? There's literally, I mean, the media helped and aided and embedded in manufacturing the consent that Joe Biden is the best person, because anybody in their right mind, right, when you actually look it up and stack it up, and even if they weren't in their right mind, look at all that stuff that's come out against Joe Biden since then. They should be able to look now and say, hey, Joe Biden really isn't our best bet, because, you know, the things that are in Joe Biden's past, any accusation that we could throw against Trump could turn around and throw it against Biden, whether it be racism, segregation, whether it be sexual assault or the appearance of sexual assault. But there, you know, the leadership has manufactured that consent. What they have not manufactured is the rage that is necessary in modern politics on the left. I mean, we have it on the far left, but we don't really have it in this mushy center left kind of space that institutional and establishment Democrats exist in. So I agree that it's not solely the fault of leadership, but leadership and the media structure absolutely has the ability to manufacture consent, because we see it right there with that very high percentage that Joe Biden gets still, even after everything that's come out about him.
Do you think that's a function of the media, or do you think that's just a function of Democratic voters who are just like, yeah, he was Obama's VP. Makes sense to me. He's been in the White House. Why couldn't he do that again? I mean, I don't even know, frankly, if those liabilities that you're talking about with Joe Biden, if Trump can exploit those. I mean, maybe he can, just insofar as depressing the Democratic turnout, right? Because that's what this election is going to be.
Yeah.
The question is, what if you tell me what the Democratic turnout will be, I will tell you if Joe Biden will win, because the Republicans are definitely going to turn out.
Absolutely.
And the Democrats have to have a turnout numbers, like percentage, that they have to hit like close to 2008. And if they don't, I mean, look, Donald Trump won with less than Mitt Romney lost with. So if Democrats get close to 2008 numbers in terms of turnout, they're going to be okay. It's just the problem. And if it's dispersed in the proper way, the problem is that people, by the time we get to the end of the race, may be a little bit, Joe Biden may not be the guy who's going to be able to excite people to get them to turn out, because people are just going to assume he's just going to win.
Yeah, I definitely follow your logic there. But he's about as exciting as John Kerry was in 2004.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really nothing about him that motivates you to get, he was Obama's sidekick. Right? How many people are going to go and you're not going to get a blockbuster turnout for a summer movie that's about Robin. You're going to get it for Batman. And this is the assumption that they're going under, which is really tragic. They had the same assumption for Hillary Clinton, and she was far more exciting than Joe Biden ever would be. So they're really taking a gamble here that is putting a lot at risk. And I agree. I think it is also a function of establishment Democrats, top to bottom, whether they be in power or just at home watching MSNBC. They are a part of this problem, even without the necessity of manufacturing consent. But I also just look at how the media has been playing some of these poll numbers and building up Biden in advance of poll numbers coming out. It really is a function of all of it, if we're to be honest.
Yeah. How durable do you think this is?
The funny thing about the primaries is that anything can literally happen, right? Like we saw with the Republican side. I really in 2015, I was bored because I assumed it was going to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton. How wrong was I, right? So I mean, Joe Biden, does he have staying power? Can he be here throughout the entire primaries? I mean, literally anything can happen, because he does have the capacity to blow it all up himself. As much of a lead as he has right now. So you never know.
What do you think about Bill de Blasio?
It's at this point, I think anyone who's over 35 is getting an opportunity to run for president. So just let me know when you decide to get in, and I'll donate some money, and I'll let you know when I get in. I don't think de Blasio is going to go far. There was one theory that I saw floating around on Twitter that I think might be worthwhile considering as we get a little closer to actual votes, was the diluting of the vote so that the superdelegates have more of an impact, because nobody they're really putting up really is resonating in a very substantive fashion. But the field is so watered down. If they all make it to Iowa, it'll be interesting to see like how watered down the votes really become. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not excited about de Blasio whatsoever. I think he's done, the typical job. I mean, you guys could speak to it more of what he's done there in the city, but he's more accomplished than Pete. So there you go. I guess that speaks to the quality of campaigns that are coming out right now.
I don't know if he speaks. I think he may speak Spanish, but that's about it. So I don't know. Doesn't Mayor Pete play the piano?
Yeah,
I don't think de Blasio
those
does, so.
cute things that we like to put in, for these guys. But at the end of the day, like Mayor Pete doesn't have, let's just be real. Like Mayor Pete doesn't belong on the national stage, right? De Blasio would belong there before him. But cool. Maybe it's, we're. I would like to think that it was a knock against American meritocracy, but it's actually not. So it's really kind of part and parcel. Mayor Pete being on the international stage is part and parcel with the lie of meritocracy. So we'll see.
All right. Well, we'll have more to talk about de Blasio maybe in later in the program. But all right. So lastly, let me just talk to you about this. Story in the New York Times that Trump basically told the Pentagon generals like he doesn't want a war with Iran. I mean, the smart analysis that I've heard has been that largely that Bolton and Pompeo have been basically trying to orchestrate a war with Iran by essentially engaging in a game of chicken with Iran and putting a brick on the accelerator, tying it and stepping away from the car and saying we're not doing anything. This is what happens. And basically telling Trump that, some version of you got to look tough. And Trump's saying I want a deal. I want a new deal. Basically they just want the same deal, but they just want to call it the Trump deal that is supposedly better than the Obama deal. But meanwhile, Bolton and Pompeo are setting the thing up so that it's a very precarious contraption. And the Iranians are basically saying, well, we're going to get rid of Pompeo and Bolton by humiliating them in Trump's eyes. And it seems like that's sort of what's been going on if this report is true, that Trump is I don't want a war. I just wanted to, be a tough guy. I don't want to get into an actual fight. I just, I was just trying to show off for my girlfriend.
You know what? And God bless him, man. I'm going to be honest with you. If there's anything that we actually need Donald Trump to deliver for humanity on is his whatever is going to drive him away from conflict with Iran, right? Whether it's ego, whether it's a bruised ego, and Jon Bolton is getting out of hand and overstepping his bounds. And, Donald Trump absolutely does not like anyone taking the show from him. So maybe a bruised ego could help save us from going to war.
Wait,
whatever it takes.
He's not the guy who sings Walking in Memphis? Okay, no, I want somebody different.
Well, when I said Michael, I was actually thinking about Mike Flynn, right? If you remember, I was it literally week 1 or week 2 of the Trump administration back in 2016 or 2017. They put Iran on notice. So there's a consistent theme in the Republican Party, the neoconservative branch of America, that has wanted to go to war with Iran for quite some time. Obviously, Saudi Arabia would be elated at that possibility. And here we are with those powers, the John Boltons, the Pompeos, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. You have some significant powers weighing down on Donald Trump. And the real question is can he get a backbone and keep us out of war? Or will he stumble into keeping us out of war because of his ego? I don't really care how it happens, but I would literally sing his praises at least for a good week on Twitter if he manages to keep us out of war.
Right. Look, hey, everybody, I totally screw everything up and we're not all dead.
Exactly.
I want a cookie.
Benjamin Dixon said I
this
did
has
a
been
great job.
The neoconservative agenda, really, probably from as early as the mid to early '90s. The Project A New American Century and all those Pearl, was it, and Wolfowitz and Cheney and the whole gang. The whole plan was we go to Iraq, then we take Syria, then we do Iran. And on some level, that's more or less what's been happening. Syria didn't work out quite the way that they thought it might, but it's at the very least, and
there's another factor. I mean, obviously, Syria didn't work out the way we wanted because, for all intents and purposes, Russia put a block on that, right? And then also they would play a role here in Iran. I mean, it's a really twisted world where we actually have to look to Donald Trump. Of course, we should. He's our president, but I digress. But then also the influence that that Putin may have. Not calling him a Manchurian candidate. Maybe he just likes Putin. Maybe he just wants to go and get a scotch with Putin. I don't care. But whatever it takes, whether it be Putin's influence, Donald Trump's ego, or whatever, we absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you read the plans or heard of the plans of 120,000 troops prepared to mobilize. I mean, that's an invasion force, and they clearly do not care about a single lesson from Iraq. In fact, I'm pretty sure they think Iraq is a success for their interests.
Yeah. Oh, no,
so,
without a doubt. I mean, I think that 120,000 troop force, which was supposedly not for an invasion, that was what it would take just to support a bombing run so that you had enough troops to keep Iran from theoretically, I guess, invading Iraq or to contain them. And I think my sense is, from the stuff that I have read, that that's the military basically saying, like, just so you know, this is going to be a total shit show. And so you ask us to bring you a number. Here's the number. It's massive. As a way of trying to basically put their thumb on the scale to say, don't do this. And, good for everybody who was involved in
coming up with that number.
Well, yes. And, but here's the thing. And this is what's so sort of like just mind-boggling on some level, right? Like, it is literally one of those things like, hey, I didn't kill you. I never get credit for saving your life. It's like one of those deals. Like, Donald Trump, if he wasn't such a moron and was actually consistent with his position, would not have appointed Mike Pompeo and John Bolton to these things. But he saw them on Fox and was like, I'm impressed. I have no idea what they do, but I love the way they talk. I don't like the mustache, but that can be shaven. This is like, it's like a child, but fortunately, he went to daddy in the military and said, no, I didn't mean it. I was just, I mean, it's good. I'm trying not to look at gift horse.
I'm still thinking about the fact that he's to shave the mustache was a critical point for Donald Trump.
It really was.
That really seems consistent with who Donald Trump is.
Well, it's going to be, and we see him sort of backing off of Venezuela a little bit, I think. And also, I suspect what happened is that some senators went to the White House and said, look, this is a bad idea because from a political standpoint, I'm sure they would all love to bomb Iran, and maybe they'll just say, like, just let Israel do it and, stop the saber rattling. I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. But maybe we will be back in a couple of weeks, Ben, talking about our new war. So hopefully
No, hopefully I'll be back just to speak with you, but not about a new war.
Indeed. All right, Ben Dixon, people check out the Benjamin Dixon Show. Find it online or wherever your podcasts are served, or you're on YouTube too, right?
YouTube, podcasts, everywhere. Everywhere they can find anyone else, I'm there.
Check it out, folks. All right, Ben, thanks so much. It was great talking to you.
Hey, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, an interview I did with Jon Benjamin just a day or two ago. He will be in studio, or had been in studio, and it's the first time he'd been in studio in a long time, and it was uncomfortable and it was awkward.
Didn't go well.
It did not go well. I'm not embarrassed to say. I've known Jon for a long time, obviously. He was the voice of the original live first Majority Report that was done on WFMU in 2003. And he has voiced all of these as well. There's a lot of baggage there, and it certainly came up in ways that I probably should have been aware of beforehand. This just coming across the transom, the Gimlet podcast network owned by Spotify. Gimlet officially recognized their workers' unions.
Oh, nice.
Now, what union are they a part of? Because I gotta get to work here. What do you know? Do we know?
I can find out.
No, none of us know anything about that.
Okay, that sounds suspicious. All right, don't forget, guys. We have a team meeting after later this afternoon.
I believe it's WGA.
Is it the WGA?
Yep.
We've got a team meeting later this afternoon where we're all going to meet and watch a video I've prepared about why it's so great working at the Majority Report.
You'll have less freedom to advance.
Exactly.
Don't you want to steer your own ship? Do you see?
Let's walk over here to our coffee station. It would be a real shame if that went away.
I gave you a flat screen. And Michael, you're a business owner too now.
That's
You
true,
see?
actually.
I mean, it was labeled 60 inches. It's
That's
not
true.
60 inches.
Michael's now part of the managerial class.
I helped produce the video.
Exactly. Michael dressed up in the Free Will costume that we have. It's like a big Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Hey, one other piece of good news. Taiwan has recognized same-sex marriage. I believe that's the first country in Asia.
That's good. So we've got those two things going for us.
Yeah, here we go. Good stuff.
Gimlet
Union
unionized.
and Gimlet.
Got some
equality in Taiwan.
Right.
All right, now the world will end.
There we go. All right, quick break, and then it'll be Jon Benjamin. Report. Next up on the program, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome back to the program Jon Benjamin, author of the book.
It's a book.
Failure is an Option. Welcome to the program, Jon.
Thank you so much, Sam.
So, Jon.
Is it okay if I drink tea?
Sure.
The whole time?
Yes.
I mean, without, as in not talk, just drink tea.
As you know, Jon, your book, Failure is an Option, is now out in paperback.
Yep.
Originally, it was written in hardcover form. Prior to that, it was...
Hard, not hard.
And that hardcover came out, when was that, about a year ago?
I think, yeah, it was about a year ago.
And prior to that, it was written in the form of a sitcom script for AMC television that I had actually written.
No.
That was completely unrelated to the book, just coincidentally the name of your book.
Have you never heard the expression failure is not an option?
Well, I mean, prior to my writing a script about
Do
it.
you think anybody ever used the expression failure is an option prior to your use of it for your failed sitcom?
Well, prior to that, the only time I had seen it before then was in regards to an article that was written about me
before,
in Boston Globe.
Before we resolve that.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said was it's complete fabrication and fallacy and not true. I didn't steal it from you.
I didn't say you stole it. It's interesting that you would say that you stole it because I didn't say that you stole it.
I'm not here to be prosecuted for a crime I didn't commit, and I don't like your tone, and I think it's not fair. And if I thought you were this was going to be a friendly, proper interview
I started
by
it that way.
a proper podcast on a proper set with proper microphones, and right now I feel like I am being attacked, and I don't need to participate in this type of discourse. So thank you very much, and I'm not leaving,
No, I
but
understand.
thank you so much.
You're
And so we are not done.
very welcome. Let's talk about this book. Failure is an option.
Yeah.
Now, we
You're
had
in
you.
it. You're in the book.
Well, that was going to actually come up because we had you on the program, and by we, really,
The consortium.
the consortium had you on this program. I don't know when it was. Maybe it was a year ago. Maybe it was when
Probably when the book came out.
the hardcover version of the book came out.
Right.
And I will concede that I had not read it yet because
I assume, like
didn't-
most of the guests you have on, you don't do proper preparation.
well, in
For
your
interviews.
instance, I was not in any way found the material compelling enough.
When is
to
the
read it.
last time you had a guest on that wrote a book where you read the book? The whole book. I mean, you don't have to read a whole book cover to cover to conduct an interview. I'll grant you that. But
Right.
you probably should skim.
Well, I didn't. I'm going to concede now that I didn't even skim your book. I didn't even see the title. Frankly, I just read it off of a piece of paper that somebody gave me. Subsequent to that, after the interview, I accidentally listened to it. Not by
yeah.
my own accord, but I was with someone else who was driving in a car for an extended period of time. We listened to the book.
Who were you with?
Steve,
Steve.
guy named Steve,
Is he a friend of yours, or is he a professional acquaintance?
professional acquaintance
Where did you meet Steve?
at a store.
You met him at a store.
Yeah,
You hadn't known him before.
no, I had not.
It was like a grocery store, or like a
It was just a typical retail store.
Home Depot or a
Sure.
Lowe's.
Very
You
similar.
met. Did
very
he work
similar
there?
to- Part-time.
But you didn't know that at the time.
No,
He
I
wasn't
mean,
wearing like a vest that said Steve, Home Depot.
he actually had a name tag.
Who doing?
Yeah.
It
It was not, if I remember correctly, it was not pegged to any type of specific outlet. All right, but that's not the point. The point is, I listened to your book, and I found it interesting. A lot of the things actually sounded very familiar to me.
I bet we've shared a lot of stories.
There was a lot of stories in there
We've
that I recognized. In fact, there were a lot of stories that I was a part of. But oddly, my name only came up once in a very ancillary way. But there was at least 2 or 3 stories where I was literally the other person involved that you did not mention my name.
I think probably you're referring to the one where the kid.
I'm referring to multiple
Okay.
aspects of the book.
Okay. I'll tell you the one that I assume you're referring to. The kid who tried to beat me up for a year.
Well, that I don't really remember that story.
In junior high school. The bully.
The bully.
I didn't even, maybe I referred to him as the bully or the asshole
That's
or the fat kid.
right. That's possible.
I didn't name you by name, but I think like any number one of those, yeah.
Well, let's go through some of these chapters because off the top of my head, they
And then
don't.
the other one would be the Midnight Pajama Jam story.
Well, okay, all right. So I'm glad.
Were you
that-
named?
Yeah, exactly. I was named in the Midnight Pajama Jam for a performance piece that I did with my calves.
Yes. But I mentioned you, like, I have to say I'll give myself a ton of credit for mentioning you in a good light, whereas I did not mention you in any of the other stories, which would have painted you in a bad light because you would have been the one in the story that was always mean to me.
That's interesting that you say that because I'd like to go through, and I don't understand how you did these chapter titles. They seem completely unhelpful in terms of how I failed at pretty much everything as a kid. I just don't have the right thing here. I don't.
So you're reading it wrong. But
I'm
then you
reading it
showed a
correctly.
good example of how you were to me always just now.
Well, I guess my point is that, wow, there's a lot of failures in option books. Boy, you really. I'm looking this up here, and it's unbelievable. There's one written by Philip Van Son.
Philip Van Son.
There's another one about mission control. Oh no, that's failures. Not an option.
That would be problematic,
right.
but that's probably true, right?
Well, I mean, for instance, the story of the script you wrote.
Space program.
The script you wrote with your friend.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great story.
Yeah, that was a good story.
Yeah, that was a great story.
But you were only like peripherally involved.
I was the co-writer of the script.
That's true. You probably helped. I probably did most of it.
I think I pitched it and went.
It was my idea. You were against it.
It was my idea.
No.
I specifically know where
No.
I got that idea.
No.
It was from going down with Mark Morris to his grandmother's house in Boynton Beach.
Oh, the show might have been
college.
your idea, but the story was my idea.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The story was your idea, but I was there the entire time. Why don't you tell people just briefly what we're talking
The
about?
summary of the story was that you probably got a script deal to write a sitcom script. I don't think you came up with the idea.
No, I did come up with the idea, but I think we probably pitched it together.
Okay. Which was a story about...
Conan O'Brien's company.
Yep. Was about two young guys who, down in their luck, right, unemployed friends who...
Go visit their grandmother or one of their
grandmother and then
grandmothers.
decide that they could live cheaply in the gated community in which their grandmother lived.
The retirement
in
home, right?
Florida.
Early retirement, I think
Early
is what we
retirement,
called it. And then...
And after that, shows, I think, have been made.
Oh, of course.
A show has been made with that premise.
Of course.
And the story in my book was you and I went...
Not you and I. The story is you
my friend,
and some nameless
my friend
person.
and I.
Right.
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 My friend and
Subject
I went...
A, right? Or something.
My friend and I went down to Florida.
Right. To
my
do research.
brother-in-law's father and mother's gated community.
Right. It's interesting to me that you get so specific about brother-in-law because that's a specific person as opposed to the way that I was addressed in that, which is just like
Friend.
Another guy.
No.
Random
friend.
guy.
Did I say friend?
Maybe.
Well, pull it up.
Okay.
I bet it says like...
Who knows?
It doesn't say like a guy and
pull
I
it up.
went...
All
It
right,
does
but
not
good.
say a guy and I went to Florida together.
All right. Well, fair enough. Keep going with the story.
It probably says a friend, which
Okay.
is probably a proper terminology, just like a
I mean,
brother-in-law.
it really wasn't just, I wasn't going as a friend. It was a professional. The whole story is about a professional story, right? It's like you were commissioned. It wasn't like you were commissioned to do a script and you brought along a friend.
It was, I probably said my friend and I were writing a script. I just didn't name you.
Right. And then what happened?
What happened in the story?
Well, maybe it was very just peripheral that I was involved in it, but good. Let's see what the rest of the story
So then the story was we went down, and when we met the parents, my friend and I, when we met them, I had an idea that I proposed to my friend because my brother-in-law's father, nice Jewish man, was telling us stories about how he wrote the annual play that was put on by the community.
Yeah.
And they were like musicals or parodies, like, I'm trying to think of what they were. They were literal examples.
Yeah.
It was like Jewish jokes,
right?
Place pun in that, like.
I'm trying to think of something from like Oklahoma or something like that, like. Oh,
well,
right.
They would be. You're right. Yeah,
right.
It would be like
something
matzo ball soup,
matzo ball soup, and right,
guys and matzo ball soup,
right? Exactly.
Dolls.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
right.
a good example. All right, so he So he, when I think we were out to a Chinese
Annie
food.
would have been like Franny or something like that. But anyways, good.
There's examples in the book. I think
Right.
I remember because he sent them to me.
To us.
I have his work. Like
Right.
he's passed away, and I have his plays.
No, I know.
So
I was
we
there.
went out to eat with him at a Chinese food buffet, and I think proposed the idea at the
buffet. I remember
with
that.
you, saying we should, instead of writing it ourselves, pay out of a portion of our money the brother-in-law's father, to write the whole script.
And then turn it in.
As
a joke.
as our work.
But as a joke.
Yeah,
I mean, because we went on to write the script.
we did.
Right.
Well, we wrote after he wrote it.
Well, we wrote it simultaneously. We handed in the,
Oh, did we?
yes.
I forgot that in the story.
Well, yeah. You also forgot to
I
mention
remember
that
the friend.
I was the other guy.
remember the friend.
Right.
It was you.
Just general friend.
It was you.
I mean, it's just weird to read these stories.
And then
which-
you recorded the phone call we had with David Kissinger,
That's right.
the son of Henry Kissinger.
That's
who's,
correct.
Head of Conan O'Brien's production company, who had to give us notes on that old Jewish man's
And A.J.
script.
Morowitz, I think.
And
And
A.J.
I just remember them saying, we feel like you wrote what you thought would be funny to us. And what we want is you to write what you think is funny to you. And we were like, really?
And it was like 65 or 70 pages. I remember. And 12
supposed to be like
12 pages of
45
it.
pages.
12 pages of it was pulled, like, I think directly from a Yiddish joke book, so he wrote, like, that was in the book, in the story as well. He wrote, like,
No, there was incredible detail.
right, it was like all the
Put into
characters
the
in a
story.
room, and then like Harold enters, and then a
Right.
joke book joke
Right.
by one character, then next character, Stuart, joke book joke.
Right. I mean, it was amazing to me that you could actually name the characters in the script that he wrote, but not the other guy
Those
who
were
was
made
involved
up.
in the story.
I'm just assuming Harold and Stuart. Those were not the characters. I'm sure.
Well,
it was
I
like-
understand, but
sure
my
it was
point
like
being that
Morty
that was-
and
I mean, it was just weird to hear that as I'm with Steve in the car and have to go, oh, that's me. And he's like,
where
"What?"
where were you and Steve going?
Driving somewhere. I don't remember. Probably a long trip.
How do you, so you often travel with him?
No, that was it. That was the last time. It was so uncomfortable when I had to say, like, oh, and that's me.
So you listened to my book on tape with Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. It was awkward. It was just awkward. And I just thought, here's
Well,
my.
what did Steve say? Because
He said, this is awkward. I don't,
why
how would I
Steve
know?
say that was awkward? Wouldn't Steve
Well, because
just
I
be
keep
like,
saying, he said, well, I don't understand. Why
So I
didn't
assume you were like, this is me. That story, that's me. I'm not even named.
I didn't get that exercised
And
until
then
like
what
the
would Steve
third or
say?
fourth.
Why was Steve mad?
Hold
Wouldn't
on
he be
for 1
like,
second.
why are you so worked up?
You going to let me answer your question?
Well, if I was Steve, I'd be like, I'm driving. I can't, like.
Well, what makes you think Steve
And
was
you're
driving?
like, what the fuck?
Wait.
This story's about me. I'm in this story and not even named.
Okay, you got to turn. You just got to. First of all,
And then Steve's trying to drive.
listen. Who said Steve was driving?
You said you were on a trip with Steve driving.
I didn't say he was driving.
You were driving.
We switched off because, frankly, by the third or fourth time in the book, when that happened in separate stories, other stories, I became a little distressed. Yes, and by the time the Midnight Pajama Jam came along,
Where you were named.
where I mentioned for like as a like it's a subsidiary, it's a completely like why in that story you could have just said, oh, and there was some guy who had calves, as opposed to in the story where I'm there in like the entire thing.
I mean, it would have been awkward, I guess.
So, well, Steve said this is awkward because why would he name you in that one, but not these other ones? And then that's the last time that Steve and I hung out.
So you mean, do you think that the...
But here is my question, John.
Wait, let me... do you think that Steve was taken aback by the way he reacted, or do you think that
No.
you never talked because I'm saying, do you think Steve felt like
Steve thought I was lying.
No, I'm saying, do you feel like Steve felt like I don't like this guy, or I don't like trust this guy? He's not the person I met at the store. And now he's like, all of a sudden we're listening to an audiobook and he's yelling about how I'm in it. And Steve was like, did you even tell him that you knew me
Steve,
before
by the
you put
end,
on my audiobook?
Steve, by the end, I didn't put on the audiobook.
Steve put it on.
Yeah.
That even makes it worse.
Well, it was super uncomfortable because
because if I were Steve,
Steve was like, this doesn't make sense. Why would he name you here and not the other places? I think you're lying about the other places. That's my whole point. John, here's my question.
Mm-hmm.
The paperback is out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you correct that?
Did I correct? Did I name
Yes. Did you go back, realize that it was a mistake, and fix it?
No, not in the way that you assume. I did redact your name from the Midnight Pajama Jam story. So I took out the one mention of you that was in the book because I felt like, I don't know, maybe you were right when you were with Steve, but I didn't even know it. I just took out your name out of spite because I didn't even want you mentioned.
Well, I think in many respects that would have been easier to deal with. Because then he probably would have been like, oh, well, that guy's not going to mention you anywhere. That's weird. He's a weird guy. As opposed to like, I don't know if I believe you. Why would he mention you here and not in the other places?
Well, I mean, all I can tell you is that you're probably going to really enjoy my next book, which is entitled Sam Seder is a Complete Asshole.
Really? That's you. So that was my next question. What's next for you?
Well, there you go. I mean, there will be tons of stories about you and who you are and how I know you as a person.
You already wrote them. You wrote them in the first book. You just didn't name me. So you're just going to basically rewrite
maybe
the
some
same.
of the stories will be repeated with you named.
All right. Fair enough. Now, let me ask you this, John. Mm-hmm. Some people have asked this question. Have you gotten in trouble for some of the things that you revealed in that book? Have any of the people, some of whom I do know, have they in any way come back to you and said, hey.
Like legally?
Well, legally or
There's
even
nothing
socially?
really in the book that I was worried about.
Well, I mean, at one point you...
I was a little bit worried about a couple of things.
What were the things you were worried about?
There was a story about a threesome.
I remember that story.
I didn't want to mention who was in it.
I know.
I mean, I was in it.
Right.
You were actually a part of that story, too, and I did not name you.
You did not.
You were not in the threesome.
I was not in the threesome. I do remember
you were almost as much in the threesome as I was, to the extent that I think I came and told you about it.
Do you think
during it
the funnier? I do remember you actually.
I left the threesome to tell you that I'm in the middle of a threesome right now.
I do remember going like, what?
Well, for people listening or watching, that the college we went to was pretty small.
Yes.
So you could have a threesome in one dorm and quickly run across the quad.
Again, it could still be going
and
on.
Alert your friend and come back.
Yeah.
And continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly based upon.
Which is actually what happened.
Particularly based upon the amount of involvement that you had. But people haven't read this.
It's
much better just to watch your appearance on Colbert to talk about it than
That's
the
true.
actual writing of the book.
And most people who read the book said the same thing.
Said the Colbert.
Said just like I bought the book based on the Colbert appearance, and then I was like, oh, I didn't really like their book.
No, people
like the
did not
appearance
say
was
that.
really good.
People did not say that.
Oh, some people did.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer writing it or voicing it?
The book?
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy writing it, but voicing it was not that fun either. So Like, well, like if I like it's hard to read your own stuff if like you don't like it.
Right.
And there was no way out of. I tried to get out of reading it, I think, but it made no sense because I'm like predominantly known for what I read, or reading aloud,
What do you mean?
like for my voice work.
What?
Oh, I'll tell you about it later.
It sounds like something that you would have pitched to them to have hired someone else to pretend they were you reading it. That would have
Yes,
been really
I think
obvious.
I pitched a couple ideas, like an old lady or
Right.
a 7-year-old or something. Yeah.
I'm almost shocked.
And I think
That-
it probably got down to like it's in your contract that you have to read it because it's the only reason we hired you to write it.
I can't help but think that you probably
Like
pitched,
we didn't even care what you wrote. It's just like you just read whatever you want.
now.
It could have been nonsense, and it might have been better.
Well, let's talk about your voice work, John. My understanding is that there is a Bob. You for those people who don't know, you are the voice of Archer on the program Archer.
Yep.
You're also the voice of Bob
On the program
Bob's
Bob's
Burgers.
which you're on.
On occasion.
Yeah.
My understanding is that there is a movie that has been announced. It'll be released in 2020. Am I a part of that?
I mean, I haven't heard your name brought up yet. As far as casting goes, it's not really my purview. I assume you could do what you normally would do and inappropriately reach out to people.
Well, I think that's in part what I'm doing now, isn't it?
Yeah. And like force yourself on them in the way that you sometimes do for a lot of things.
Well, I feel like that's what I'm doing at this moment.
You want me to reach out for you.
Well, I'm reaching out to you to put some pressure on. I mean, the idea that the star of the show
I would think
would
like
have no influence on bringing back an extremely popular character who was in the pilot episode is almost hard to believe.
No, I mean, I'm not saying I don't have a lot of influence in casting decisions. I probably, if I wanted to, I could probably go directly to the creator of the show and bring up your name
Right.
and say, remember that character from season 1 or whatever.
Well, it wasn't just season 1. I think you'll find it was not just in season 1.
Yeah, and I could definitely do that, and I have done that with other people, like frequently have said like, oh, you should hire, and on every occasion where I have done that, it has happened.
Good.
Yeah, I just don't know whether I'm going to do that yet.
All right. Fair enough. Let me ask you this, John. You've been on Archer for what now? 8 years? 9 years?
I did just think about it, and no, I'm not going to do that.
All right.
I don't think I'm going to contact the creator about that.
Well, you know what? You don't need to make a decision right now.
Well,
So you can just think about it a little bit more.
okay. I mean, I think I just did, but I think I.
You thought about it, but I'm saying you could think about
Sure,
it
of course
more.
I could rethink it.
I'm not saying rethink it. I would just say don't even complete the...
No, like I said, you brought it up. I thought about it. I said I declined, and then you said rethink it, and I.
Well, let's just
I'll
table
think-
that for now, shelve that, come back to it later at a different time then.
I mean, that would be a big opportunity for you to
I
be
mean,
able to
it
do
probably
that.
would. It probably would. John, you've been on Archer now for how long?
10 years.
10 years. And how long have you been on Bob's Burgers?
About 10 years, I think.
Are you going to do anything new or anything that's in any way challenging? I mean, just as a
I don't know. Would you like?
theoretically,
Would
as
you
a
like?
excuse me. Let me finish my question. As an actor, as an artist, do you ever feel like I'm just resting on my laurels because I've been doing the same thing for so long, and I just show up and talk into a microphone? And
It seems somewhat ironic based on you being here, but
what do you mean?
let me ask what you're doing. But I don't know. Like, I would say I would say no. I still enjoy it as much as I did at the very beginning, and
So no new challenges.
and I don't know
just
whether I wouldn't know whether
go
you
through the
would you
motions.
go up to like President Barack Obama in year 7 and say, "Do you still enjoy doing this thing that you're doing?
I think that's a valid
Are
question.
you gonna maybe just stop now?"
Well, I mean, he has 2 terms. You've actually gone beyond that.
Well,
And I'm
there's
just
no
asking as
term
an
in what
artist-
I do, but
as
you
an artist-
understand the analogy.
As an artist, do you miss having anything that's challenging or new
Would
or
you
fresh?
go approach Pablo Picasso and say, like, "Are you still going to do the painting thing
Well, I think
or
Picasso
the sculpture
actually
thing that you're doing, or
would challenge
maybe you
himself.
want to
That's
make
why I
a
asked.
movie or branch out or do something else?"
Well, I mean, even just do a different character. I mean, for God's sakes.
Well, I play several characters on the show.
Well, there's no reason to get defensive about it.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I mean, I did rethink that thing we were talking about earlier
Which-
again, and I'm going to actually double down and say that no, definitely not going to contact the creator of the show to help you out.
Well, like I say, we have a lot of time, John. You don't need to.
Well, that's
do
like
that.
twice now that I've rethought it, and I feel like that's like probably like
Is
that would be the
failure is an option. Is that available widely, or is it just being put out in a narrow situation?
I don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in Barnes and Noble. Are you familiar?
I didn't. To be honest with you, I did not know that they were still around.
They are.
Okay.
They're still brick and mortar, Barnes and Nobles, I believe. I bet you can get it online on Amazon
Interesting.
or one of your an Audible,
Mm-hmm.
the book version.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where else you can get it.
John, why no YouTube channel for you? You have a lot of YouTube videos around. I went back the other day and I watched baby pranks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's still on YouTube.
it's still on YouTube. I don't think you.
Well, I would be like, I would have to like make new content, and that's I
guess that was sort of my point.
Well, I'm like, I would say one day every 2 weeks doing the Bob character. I am also one day every 2 months doing the Archer character.
And that must get exhausting.
So where do you fit in time to do a YouTube channel?
Right.
I mean, it's something that you told me to do a long time ago. I never did it.
Right.
But all those videos are very old, and I haven't necessarily made new ones.
They're all in 4x3.
Really?
Yeah.
You can thank Bill Buckendorf. for
Well, I mean, who knew where things were going?
that. What is the new format?
The new format is 3x5, basically, or what is the new format? 7 by I can't remember. 8 by 6 by 8 by I don't know. 8 by 10s.
I mean, like, what would I do?
12 by
like
34?
honestly, what would I do? Like, a YouTube channel would have to be like what YouTube is now, which is like what you do. You know, just like
No
filler.
filler. Right.
Well, like just as someone talking for an hour. That's like what my kid watches.
Okay.
I mean, I could do that. I could like play a video game.
Well, there's a lot of people who do that.
Mm-hmm.
Matt wants to do that.
You do that.
I'm looking to get into it in the future.
As in, like, shoot yourself in an inset box playing a video game.
Yep.
Yeah. My kid would watch you.
Yeah.
It's great. Anything else interesting, John, going on with you?
Is there a park around here that has a rhinoceros sculpture?
Maybe.
I heard there was.
It's interesting. Interesting question. Anything else? Live performances where people can see you? Is there a web? You don't even have a website, do you?
No. What do you mean? I have a job. I mean, I have a job. I don't need a website. I have a job.
Well, do you perform live? Is there places people can see you
do you go up to your
live?
postman and say, like, you have a website?
A lot of postmen do.
Do you go to your the guy in your building, the super, and say, like, do you have a website I can take a look at?
Well, I mean,
He has a job. He's doing something.
I talk to a lot of performers and comedian types.
Mm-hmm.
They all have websites, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it just because you said so, and I'm not doing it just because they do.
All right. Well, there you have it. Jon Benjamin, stuck in the past, ladies and gentlemen, refusing to move into the future. Nevertheless, they put out a paperback book and an audio version. I imagine there's a Kindle version. Does that bother you?
Why? Oh, because it's technology. It's
Yeah.
like advanced technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy reading on a Kindle. I mean, I don't have a Kindle, but I don't enjoy reading on my phone or my computer, if that's what you're getting at.
No. So failure is an option.
Mm-hmm.
They re-released it. Does in that way cut against a little bit about the premise of the book, John? Lastly?
I mean, I'm not sure it's a total success, but they did make it a paperback.
So perhaps a sequel. Moderate success is also an option. That's just a...
Success is not an option.
No, moderate success is an option.
Right. Or success is an option.
Or success is an option.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, feel free to take that. It's not like you needed my permission anyways.
Well, feel free to re-pitch that show that didn't go, that you still probably have, called Failure is an Option, because they passed on it.
Well,
so feel free to try and
AMC did not
resell
go
it
into
again.
comedy. That's not my fault.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't foresee you being on Bob's Burgers anytime soon.
great. Well, I've got a lot of other things to do. In fact, we're going to have to move on with this show. So,
Thanks for having me.
see yourself out.
Do I have to leave right now? I can't get up because I went poo-poo in my pants.
Quick break. We'll be right back after this. All right, folks. What?
I just want to say in response to I guess some of the feedback that it's true, and the tension between these two is real. It's very uncomfortable anytime they interact, and there's nothing ironic or comedic about that. Sam and Jon Benjamin hate each other to the point where I really wonder why we do this, because it's painful for everybody.
Well, sometimes a little bit of pain is good to flush the system. No, that everything you saw in that interview is completely true. And that is actually, Michael, the chair you're sitting in now. It's actually the chair that John was sitting in.
Aware.
And,
I'm well aware.
Michael's going to sage the place later.
eBay it
Well,
this weekend.
I sage I sage it every day after you guys leave. I come back from the gym and sage out all the bad energy.
It's going to take a lot more sage. John actually told the story in his book, Failure is an Option. I think it was in that story that he had a problem on the 405 highway in California, and it's not a problem that's just I should say restricted to cars. So, like I say, Michael, that is the seat that he was sitting in. In fact,
Indeed.
my daughter, when she was young,
We should unionize.
what do you mean we? You and I as management?
Well,
Or-
well, my show shouldn't be, because it's kind of like a fast-moving independent enterprise, but a sclerotic incumbency show.
Nice try. Nice try. The my daughter actually. I'm trying to see if I can find it. When that happened to John, John told my daughter the story, and she made this this song, which I turned into a ringtone. Hold on, here it is.
Jon Benjamin has diarrhea. I don't care if it don't go diarrhea. Just diarrhea, my little
Yeah, I don't know what she was singing.
The sort of projects that
Beautiful.
you've produced for your daughter to harass your friends are definitely your greatest comedic accomplishment.
That is the phone ring when John calls me. The Jon Benjamin has a diarrhea song, which maybe we should be selling on Spotify or something like that. All right. In the meantime,
That's really funny.
I can see why she got into that performing arts high school.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. Yes, she came up with that herself. I don't know what the other words were. The other words were in the song. Folks, just a reminder, this show relies on your support. You can become a member of The Majority Report by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you become a member, you get extra content every day. You get no advertisements on the show. And you feel good about yourself for supporting this program. Every day we bring you long-form interviews, more often than not. Some days we just do a roundup of news stories. There's been a lot of news, obviously. We are looking to expand a little bit. We may have a new offering for you soon. But we will have more information on the future. And your support helps us do that and grow. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Great company, 10% off with the discount code MAJORITY. You can get the Majority Report blend. Michael, today is Friday, as you know, which is followed by the weekend.
Indeed.
Then Monday happens, and then Tuesday. So
correct.
Tell us about Tuesday. Or the one that happened prior to today.
Emma Vigeland, Iran's hidden revolution, Joe Biden's BS, got into a lot. Pretty bad lefty, Chad Vigorous, is coming in on Tuesday. He's brilliant, incredibly funny guy. His podcast, The Discourse, is really good. We'll probably be doing some pundit paper grading and talking about a bunch of other stuff. This weekend, I think we're going to unlock it because we did a sort of in-depth primer with Trita Parsi on what's happening with Iran, but also got into like what's happening in the internal politics of Iran. And next week, a primer on Hezbollah. So patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Lots of clips up there now.
Jamie?
This week on the Antifada, we speak with Samuel Stein, author of Capital City, Gentrification, and the Real Estate State, about why the global housing crisis is happening right now, how it exposes the inherent contradictions within capitalism, and what we can do to fight back, both within a capitalist framework and looking toward a long-term communist horizon, incorporating examples of how they run things in actually existing socialist countries like Cuba. He also explains the term real estate state and why Trump is the apotheosis of it. And in the patrons-only bonus, we tell some of our wildest housing stories, including the time Sam's landlord literally went to jail for trying to murder a tenant and still got to keep the building, but then Sam was evicted for an illegal sublet.
And Matt.
Literary Hangover, The Song of Hiawatha will be up on the YouTube channel tomorrow, so subscribe and check that out. Next week, probably earlier in the week, I'll release the Margaret Fuller episode. She's an early feminist and socialist in the sort of related to the transcendental movement, but she transcended the transcendental movement. And that'll be also available for everybody next Saturday.
Who transcends the transcenders?
I wish that after you said that, you played, I don't know why, but just Herman Cain going, "Please don't talk over me," which is what liberals do.
We might see more from Herman Cain in the next couple of days, actually.
I'm looking forward to that.
Why is that?
I think I saw something on Twitter. I'm going to check it out, see if it was funny. But I think
he was a part of that capitalism versus socialism thing that they did on Fox Business yesterday.
Richard Wolff was there too.
I should try and check that out. All right, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. We'll be right back after this.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
On Almost has what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back, back, back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danner Keith's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em. Almost has what?
What?
Almost has what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
and the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black.
You see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em, fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
It's pretty amazing. All right, let's just start with this. Donald Trump has pardoned someone who was really down on his luck and has really... The president can pardon whoever he wants, really, for any reason. You recall that Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich on the way out of his administration. People were very upset about that. I think with some justification, frankly, not appropriate in my estimation. I think Eric Holder was one of the people who promoted that. If I'm not misremembering. It turns out that Donald Trump has pardoned Conrad Black. Conrad Black, of course, a Canadian. He was a wealthy publisher. He was actually the Lord Black of Cross Harbor, I think. He is I should say Canadian, but he's British-born. No, I'm sorry. Canadian-born British citizen. He was the head of a big international newspaper enterprise that included, I think, the National in Canada and maybe a Chicago paper, others. And in 2007, Black was convicted of mail fraud and obstruction. In the United States. He was supposedly going to defraud the shareholders of the company that owned all those newspapers of a lot of money. He was convicted on all the counts, but I think 2 were overturned subsequent to that, and he ended up going to prison, I believe, for 2 years.
You can't be defrauding the ruling class.
No. That is you got to steal from the right people, and so here he is on Laura Ingram's show last night, explaining why he got the pardon. He just wants to make it clear to everybody that it has nothing to do with the biography that he wrote about Donald Trump. What is the title of it? It is literally something like Oh, yeah, it's Donald J. Trump, a president like no other. And
It's a beautiful title.
He's also written several op-eds. I think one of them was literally entitled "Trump is the Good Guy."
That rules.
It was tough but fair.
But
You know, it was a very honest piece, and it came down to some unmistakable conclusions in a fair way.
And Conrad Black wants you to understand that that had nothing to do with the pardon.
Conrad, everybody knows that you and I have known each other for a long time, and I've spoken about your absurd case for many, many years and written about it. But your reaction to those who say that this was just your flattery that won you a pardon?
Laura, thank you for having me on. My reaction is I have absolutely no reason to believe that the president is even aware that I wrote that book. He certainly has never mentioned it. and in any case, anyone who has read it can see that it is not uncritical. It's no whitewash. It's
tough.
Points out some of the less salubrious aspects of his career. And I'm not uncritical of him. In general, I am a supporter for policy reasons. And he was at pains to say when he phoned last week that his motivation, and he authorized me to say this, urged me to say this, was not that we've known each other a long time or that I've been generally supportive of him. It is that after careful examination by the White House counsel and his legal staff, they confirmed what Alan Dershowitz and other lawyers said on my behalf. And the president's own words were, it was an unjust verdict. And I never should have been charged, and it was a bad rap. Those were his motives. If he handed favors out to his friends, then, you know, there would be, you'd have 5 ambassadors in every embassy.
And
Okay, first off, so we're to believe that his lawyers, that Conrad Black is just super lucky that his last name starts with a B. Because I was going down the list and I got to the B's and then you just stood right out.
It was a lugubrious process.
Look, there's this black guy. There's this black guy that wrote a positive book about me. We need to get him out of jail.
His name is Conrad Black, and he's my black. He said, though it wasn't all lugubrious, that it was good.
Put up the tweet that Trump also wrote. He didn't. There's no indication. That probably did not come up at all when Donald Trump authorized Conrad Black to say, "This is not just because I know you, but it's because you really deserved it."
What an honor to read your piece. As one of the truly great intellects and my friend, I won't forget.
That was in 2015.
Right, so I forgot about it.
Total coincidence. I forgot about that.
I had amnesia, and then I was going through because you got to go by the list. And so we were down it's like at least several hundred people before you go through it. And after careful judicial review,
and look,
we just happened to fall upon this guy.
I just love the fact that Conrad Black is like, I'm going to go on television. Like, rather than just sort of lay low, I'm going to go on television and tell people this definitely was not because I've written all that positive stuff about Donald Trump or that I've known him for a long time. If Donald Trump, he wants us to believe that Donald Trump is not the type of guy to give his friends favors.
I don't pay attention to the press.
Yeah, that's not true. Just, I mean, it's literally the one thing I think people understand about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump was probably like the third person to sign up for Google alerts for their own name, like in the history of the service.
It was how I learned how to use Google, actually.
It's like a hack that tells you everything someone's saying about you.
It's amazing.
I had no idea you wrote a book about me, calling me a unique president. No idea. It's just amazing that they can just, everyone involved in the production of that hit on television didn't just die of embarrassment in that one moment. Like,
well,
literally.
In a way, it would have been even more difficult if I knew he wrote a book about me, because that would have had the appearance of impropriety. And we all know that when you're in office, it's a tough standard. So it's one thing, actual impropriety, which you can never do. But even the appearance of impropriety is a problem. So lucky for Conrad, I didn't know he wrote the book.
If he wrote a book that was nasty about me, I would have pardoned him sooner.
If he wrote a book that was bad, I would have had to pardon him on the first day.
And frankly, I would have had to have had someone read it for me and then explain it to me. So, unbelievable.
Big reader.
Big reader. I like to read big things.
I read books about ideas, not people.
Here is Fox News. Fox and Friends apparently did not get the word that Donald Trump felt like he had gone into the deep end without knowing how to swim, and had told the generals, like, I didn't think it would turn into a war. I just wanted the mullahs to think I was cool. And before that happened, apparently Fox and Friends thought the war, we were still down with the war. And here is Fox and Friends' Sean Parnell explaining why we need to get into a massive war with Iran, with a lot of people dying.
But this, truthfully, should not be a surprise to anybody. I feel like we've been at war with Iran for 40 years. Like, I don't like to fight, but if I walk into a bar and a drunk guy starts throwing punches at me, I'm going to fight whether I like it or not. And the fact of the matter is that Iran has been killing Americans for 40 years now, and we've really done nothing about it.
Who is that idiot?
That is Sean Parnell.
The CEO of, where's the... Sean Parnell, CEO of Branding Freedom.
Yup. That's incredible.
Now, to be fair to Sean, he is a retired Army. He was a captain. He was with the 10th Mountain Division, so he probably saw a significant amount of fighting, at the very least, I would imagine, in Afghanistan. But he doesn't seem. I wouldn't make him a general. Let's put it that way. The whole, if there's a drunk guy in a bar and he's going to throw a fight,
is he under the impression that Afghanistan's a giant bar?
Also,
no, I think
it would be in Iraq.
Right. I mean, the war itself, I guess, would be fought at least in parts in Iraq, and the idea is that Iran is not just some big drunk guy. And it's not just him who's going to be taking the punches. There's going to be a lot of other civilians who are going to be killed, hundreds of thousands probably, if we're lucky to avoid greater casualties. But that's basically what it is. This mentality of like, it's just like happens in a bar when people are drunk. That's all that war really is. It's just like that, but more. Just a little bit more.
I also like, and I mean, this, people have been pointing this out about Iran for a while, so this is not, a new point, but it bears repeating. Like, and Tom Cotton did this the other day, right? When he's sitting there with Margaret Hoover, like, it's going to be 2 strikes, like doing his, like, whatever.
The first one and the last one.
First one, last one. I'm getting too old for this, like that.
I am the danger.
Right. Yeah, I am the danger. Well, okay. So if Iran is the equivalent of first strike, last strike, and a fight in a bar fight, then that might contradict the like greatest threat to humanity and the future of America's existence right now. You're gonna have to decide whether like core geostrategic threat, even though they don't even have the most powerful military in the Middle East, or something that like, we can just go and thrash them a little bit. And I mean, of course, what's incredible is like the answer is obviously somewhere in between of like, they're obviously not a threat to us, but they are way more sophisticated and capable than Iraq. And look at how horrific and disastrous Iraq was on every level.
I would also add that if you're going to use the analogy of a drunk guy in a bar fight, it's the United States that looks a lot more drunk.
Getting into fights all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have basically these rogue elements that are creating the circumstance for the fight. They're the ones, who are going up and saying like, hey, buddy, what's with those shoes? Or what are you doing here? This is not your bar. That type of thing.
You think you're going to go to that bar where people share stuff? I'm going to kick your ass before you
Excuse me. Sorry, did you say something? Are you looking at me? Why don't you take a picture? It lasts longer. Yeah. And then, of course, Donald Trump has to tell the generals, like, I'm afraid of Bolton's mustache. Can you please tell him no war, please?
They said that if we talked like that, then they would apologize and kiss me and then give me money. But that isn't happening, and now I'm scared. Can you help me, please?
It's I don't know. I can't tell if I feel like, oh, okay, there's like actually a system here that is deeply damaged, or there's actually a system that is at least somewhat rational and working. Like, like where you can have a lunatic element in the administration, but there's enough non-lunatics to push back. I can't tell.
Well, they're all lunatics in different ways, right?
Yes, but I'm talking like in ways that aren't going to end up killing hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, well, Trump's lunacy is he likes to talk shit on Twitter, but to the degree that he has an ideology where any of us is concerned, he's an isolationist, I think, because war is annoying and he'd have to like talk about stuff that's not himself a lot and like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I don't
know.
It's
also
that
the
he's...
repetition. I would have to talk about it every day.
I'm also bored of what's that old general with MacArthur or whatever. I haven't cited him in ages.
MacArthur. I mean, look, he founded the country. That was great.
Those
that
were
was
the
a long
olden
time
days.
ago.
Yeah, those were the olden days.
He chopped
I don't think it's accurate to say that Trump is an isolationist in any shape or form. I think it's just that people came to him and said, it's going to hurt your re-election chances to get into a war that you haven't sold the American public on. And I think he's like, oh, okay. I think he's just a guy who literally, I don't think he cares one way or another. I think it's just a question of like, what does he think is going to help him at any given point? And I don't think he has, I don't even think that he is, I don't think he thinks about stuff enough to consider himself an isolationist. I don't think that he, even in terms
of pragmatic,
he's an isolationist when Jeb Bush is around.
Yeah,
after the fact.
A lot of people think that MacArthur should have gotten credit, but my question is, why did you chop down the cherry tree to begin with? Maybe more people should be asking that question.
Donald Trump is rolling out a new immigration plan. Part of that is there's a couple of parts of it, and I haven't quite seen all of it, but there was a story today where Trump is planning, and we've heard reports about this, right, like a couple of weeks ago, and it was unclear, but apparently Customs and Border Protection has not publicly disclosed its plans, but there was local leaders in Broward and Palm counties supposedly got wind of the plan that calls for releasing of asylum seekers and potential immigrants to those two districts in Florida. They've been told to expect the arrival twice a week of 135 asylum seekers rerouted from the El Paso area. That's equivalent to about 1,000 people per month divided between the two counties. They're not getting any funding whatsoever for this. You're going to have people in there, obviously, who many who don't speak English. I mean, Florida is not the worst case scenario for an influx of Spanish-speaking people to the extent that they're all speaking Spanish. I mean, there's a lot of people who I think end up speaking indigenous dialects or languages from, depending on who they are. We don't know who's going to be released there. But the idea, I guess, is to put pressure on these counties. Maybe this is, some way of creating stress there so that Trump can carry those counties maybe in an election. I don't know. But it's pretty stunning. And here is Donald Trump laying out the other parts of the immigration plan, which theoretically is about getting the best and the brightest, which ends up, based upon the system in which we determine that, will keep out essentially people who are poor, people who are coming presumably from horrible situations in Latin America, and, will ultimately probably end up allowing for more immigration from countries that are a little bit paler.
Priority will also be given to higher wage workers, ensuring we never undercut American labor. To protect benefits for American citizens, immigrants must be financially self-sufficient. Finally, to promote integration, assimilation, and national unity, future immigrants will be required to learn English and to pass a civics exam prior to admission.
All right, I mean, that's fairly straightforward to figure out, right? I mean, if you're coming from a European country where English is taught in the schools and you have access to funds because you are a high wage earner, you're going to be able to take the classes. You're going to have access to all this information that you need to get into the country. And so this is a bit of a bank shot for them, but that's what it is. And it is, it really is basically affirmative action for white Europeans to come into this country, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, as if that many of them want to come into our backwards nation.
I mean, I imagine some do, but, there's probably maybe in some businesses more opportunity for them here. But why is their seeking more opportunity more legitimate than people who are less wealthy seeking opportunity? Why is their desire to come to this country more legitimate than people who are seeking asylum because their country is a crap show? Like, if there are jobs for those people who come in at low wages, then we have a need for them just as much as those people who are coming in with seeking high wages. There's really ultimately only one way to explain it, and I'm quite sure they have run the numbers on this. They've probably done a reverse model on this in some way.
Well, I mean, I think they also know, at least certain sectors of the people who are doing this know, that it's not going to totally stop immigration coming into this country, but they want the people who are here to be undocumented and in danger so that they can't, agitate for their rights. And it's easier to scapegoat them and say to, American-born workers, hey, these are the people who are undermining your rights, not the policies that we made.
This is an amazing story. That is this the this AOC was questioning a farmer executive about the drug. It's a PrEP drug called Truvada. It is one of, I think, maybe the only drug that you can take as a prophylactic against HIV. And this drug was developed with government grants, was patented by the government. Somehow they're not enforcing the patent, and a private company has it. It's charging nearly $2,000 in the United States. It's a little bit cheaper in other places. Let's just play part of this video. People should check it out. Is this the which video is this?
It's the longer one.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's watch some of this here.
So the list price is almost $2,000 in the United States. Why is it $8 in Australia? Mr. O'Day, you're the CEO of Gilead. Is it true that Gilead made $3 billion in profits from the sales of Truvada in 2018?
$3 billion in revenue.
Oh, yes, in revenue, thank you. And very quickly, the current list price is $2,000 a month in the United States, correct?
The current list price is $1,780 in the United States, and just to correct, the $3 billion was a global figure.
Okay,
for Truvada for PrEP.
So the list price is almost $2,000 in the United States. Why is it $8
Matt, can
in
you turn up the volume? I'm not hearing any sound.
Truvada still has patent protection in the United States, and in the rest of the world it is generic.
There's no reason this should be $2,000 a month. People are dying because of it, and there's no enforceable reason for it. Dr. Grant, Truvada for PrEP is the only known drug that can prevent the transmission of HIV, correct?
It's the only medication that's been approved by the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
It's also known that tenofovir alone is prophylactic for HIV. Can prevent
Thank you. And Dr. Grant, it was your NIH-funded research on PrEP that built on the earlier research work patented by CDC researchers. Is that correct?
Yes. My clinical trial was informed by CDC research in two ways. One, the CDC demonstrated that the pre-exposure dose was added to the efficacy of PrEP.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. And I would also like to seek unanimous consent to submit this Yale School of Law study into the congressional record, which concludes that the CDC's patents for PrEP were both valid and enforceable against Gilead.
Ordered.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lord, thank you for your advocacy here today. Is it true that the public invested $50 million to develop PrEP?
That is correct.
Is it also true that Gilead relied on publicly funded trials to obtain FDA approval?
Yes, if you look at their supplementary new drug application, you'll see that every sponsor of Truvada as PrEP was a non-Gilead sponsor.
When folks can't access PrEP because it's so expensive and we spread, the HIV epidemic continues, that also comes at a public cost, right? So the public is paying, we paid to develop PrEP, we paid to finance the publicly funded trials to develop this drug. We also pay and foot the bill with patient assistance programs, and also we pay when the HIV epidemic gets spread as well.
All right, let's pause it here. We don't need to see any more. I mean, the point of it is, it's stunning. I mean, first off, the idea that we're not, we have. I mean, this is like there's like four different problems that are rolled up in one in this, but. We allow drug companies to maintain their drugs on patent for way too long. We should be regulating drugs relative to their importance and their costs to people so that we have price controls. The idea that the same drug in the United States costs $1,992 more than it would in Australia is absurd. It's just absurd. It's not even a question of trying to figure out how to lower drug prices. It's why are we with our mechanisms working so hard to inflate them? I mean, we should be upholding our patent in this, and another like major problem is that the idea that that the government's development of these drugs is completely unseen by the general population.
Yeah,
all right,
that's a really important point to hammer on that I think she did very well. Like, they're always justifying these drug prices by saying, oh, it spurs innovation, it spurs research and development, when so much of research and development is publicly funded.
All right, let's go to the phones. You calling from a 410 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. Hi, crew. Hi, degenerates in the YouTube chat. It's Leslie from Penn State.
Leslie from Penn State. How you doing? What's on your mind?
So, at the top of the program, we talked a little bit about abortion and the restrictive rules that they're making in places like Georgia and Alabama. And I also saw earlier this week that America's Burden, Meghan McCain, was saying something about how science says life begins at conception. And I just graduated 2 weeks ago with a degree in biology with a focus in genetics and development. So if you want, I can lay some science on you about how she's not correct.
Whatever. My father was John McCain, so I think you should listen to me.
Yes, lay some science down.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so around week 5 to 6, which is where a lot of these heartbeat bills are becoming restrictive, they're not actually detecting a heart. They're detecting this little bundle of mesoderm cells, which is called a heart tube. And we don't really see heart structures like chambers or valves forming close to until week 7 or week 8. And then from a neurological perspective, you only have minor reflexive movements present in the first trimester. Brainstem functions don't finish until the second semester, and you don't see cerebral cortex higher functions develop until the third trimester. So a lot of these people who are saying oh, life begins at conception. Well, zygotes are genetically unique and they're able to generate their own complex substructures. They're still dependent on the mother for oxygen and nutrition. So it doesn't really become a question of life. It becomes a question of ethics as to when it's ethical to terminate a pregnancy, because these people, they often conflate life and consciousness. And we still don't really necessarily know when consciousness begins, let alone what it is. So it's just, they're not being intellectually honest because they're distilling and simplifying down this debate when the scientific consensus on when life begins is still kind of out, and it's a really complex issue.
So these so-called heartbeat bills, what we're hearing at that point is really not so much a heartbeat, because the heart has not fully formed. It's almost closer to a pulse, right? Is that it?
Yeah. During week 4 development, we have something called gastrulation, which is where you have the 3 main derivative tissue types form, which are the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm, and they become all your various organs and linings and stuff like that. So around week 5 to 6, they have a heart tube, which is literally a tube that sort of elongates into a bit of an S shape. And you see some twitching activity, but it doesn't really become fully regulated until it's hooked up with the neural tube and what becomes the brain stem. And at that point in 6 weeks, the neural tube hasn't even closed. So the precursor to what becomes the brain and the spinal cord hasn't even formed yet.
So when is there actually a heart that is connected to the brain that creates, at the very least, what we could really call a heartbeat?
Well, it's sort of a difficult question to answer because the heart and the brain develop at different rates. You start to see little mini structures of the heart where you have the 4 chambers and some of the veins and valves and stuff around week 9. However, that's not really connected to anything very complex neurologically. It's connected to the neural tube, but the brainstem, which in humans controls stuff like respiration, doesn't really form until the end of the second trimester, which is around 20, 21 weeks.
Okay. So really, to the extent that we know, when we talk about a heart in the vernacular, we're talking 20, 21 weeks is really the is the first time there's actually a heart as we speak of it.
Well, it's the time when you get the heart hooked up to the nervous system, because the heart can beat independently if it has to, but you don't really see that hookup of the nervous system until those sort of basal functions in the brainstem, the spinal cord, begin to develop.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, there it is. I mean, I think Meghan McCain made it pretty clear that the theory is that life, and it's, I guess, what's what constitutes life, do you think, in their nomenclature, and what would science say is life? Because isn't a cell life? Just if I was to take a cell from my hand, isn't that life?
Yeah, not to mention all of the animals.
Okay, so now we're kind of getting into what differentiates a living cell from an organism. So an organism is considered to be a genetically unique entity, which is capable of forming complex substructures in order to grow, develop, sustain itself, and eventually reproduce. So that's what we would consider an organism, at least from a more biological perspective. So while your skin cells and stuff are alive, and the cells in your heart and the cells in your brain individually, they are alive. They're they're part of an organism, so they themselves are not necessarily like alive per se. I don't know if that sort of answers your question a little more.
But that is the dilemma, right? Because a fetus is life in the same way that a cell is life, but if it cannot survive distinct from the system in which it is a part of at that time, and the system is the mother, is a woman at that time, that, you know, life has, there's plenty of things that constitute life that aren't a person, that isn't alive in and of itself, right? That doesn't exist distinct from being part of a larger human being. And so that is, I guess, the distinction I'm trying to sort of like tease out here is that notion of that entity, you know, like, and to a large extent, like, I'm not even sure that we need to go through this exercise, but I think it is important because people are claiming to cite science and they're not. And so that is the distinction there, right? Like, there is all part of our body is life. It's not dead. If you know, my organ was dead, I'd want it removed. But if I remove, but the organ itself is not, you know, nobody is giving my pancreas, nobody's giving my pancreas or my kidney rights outside of me in my body. But theoretically, right, we could, you know, science is ultimately going to get to a place where we could take my kidney and take maybe some structure out of it and create a separate, distinct human life, right?
Yeah, that's quite literally hundreds of years down the pipeline. But yeah, through generation of stem cells from already differentiated tissues, we are starting to see sort of the very beginnings of processes like that. And the thing that just really gets me is that a lot of these right-wingers, they're conflating life with consciousness. And like, it used to be before we had like a lot of like ultrasound technologies, the quickening, which is sort of like when the mother can first feel the movements of the fetus, which is around 18 to 20 weeks, was generally like considered when like the fetus transitioned into like personhood. And when you're talking in terms of premature babies, we've had such advances in technology. It used to be the consensus in like the 70s and the 80s that like we could never have a preemie survive that was under 26 weeks. Then it became under 24 in the 90s. Now in the 2010s, you're seeing rather regularly these miracle cases of 20, 21, 22-week-old embryos surviving. Some of them have disabilities, but a few of them pull out and they're relatively normal. And that's sort of become a double-edged sword, and it's given these theocrats like a bigger window to push their religious agenda onto pregnant people.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate the phone call. It is nice to talk to someone who actually knows the science. And,
yeah, my father was in Vietnam.
Yeah. Also, really, really quick, in one of the bills, I think it said something about like reimplanting ectopic pregnancies, like taking the pregnancy from where it's implanted in the fallopian tube and putting it into the uterus. We literally can't do that. We do not have the technology to do that.
Tell people what an ectopic pregnancy is.
Okay, so an ectopic pregnancy is, so when fertilization occurs, the egg and sperm are joined in the fallopian tubes, which lead from the ovaries to the uterus. Normally around week 3 of after fertilization, the egg begins to travel down those tubes and implants itself between week 3 and week 4 into the side of the uterus, and that's where you get those first tissue layers to form as well as the beginnings of the placenta to form. In an ectopic pregnancy, it doesn't travel down all the way, so you get the egg, this zygote, implanting into the lines of the oviduct. And as the fetus grows, you're stretching the oviduct, which is not meant to stretch, and it can burst and hemorrhage and cause a lot of like horrific life-threatening medical issues for the mother, which is why ectopic pregnancies are basically, as a rule, always terminated because it threatens the life of the mother. What they're talking about is being able to cut out that zygote from the oviduct, damaging the oviduct, implant it into the uterus, which involves creating another incision in the uterus, making you vulnerable to infection, and somehow magically getting the zygote to detach from the oviduct tissue and reattach to the uterus tissue. We can't do that. We don't have the technology to do that. And they just wrote it in the bill like this is what would have to happen. It's ridiculous.
Okay, but you are completely discounting how God would come in and do that.
I mean, if some magical person from the sky can, like, wave their hands and make that happen, like, more power to them. But I think statistically the odds are not good.
You want a little bit of an assist?
I think...
Maybe I could help with that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, with all due respect, you're talking science, but you obviously forgot that it's not some person. It would be a guy. God's a guy.
True.
All right. Well, I appreciate that little burst of science for people. Hopefully that's going to still be relevant in the coming years, and folks like you won't be rounded up for speaking heresy. But I appreciate the call.
Thank you. All right. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Thanks again.
Maybe I could be of some assistance. That would actually be a really funny commercial.
All right, folks, we don't have too much time left here. Let's go to calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
Mindy! How are you, Mindy?
Hi. First, I'm good. First, I want to give a shout-out to FDR Marks.
FDR Marks.
Yeah. Second of all, that was uncomfortable with Jon Benjamin.
Yeah, it was.
Let's not do that again.
It was super uncomfortable.
And number three, what?
It was super uncomfortable for me, I can tell you.
Super uncomfortable for me, too.
All right.
So we're all on the same page with that. Third thing is, in reference to this baby thing, this is such complete bullshit. When I had my second, I know technology has changed in 25 years since I've had my daughter. But when I had my daughter, my second child, I was close to 35, and they wanted me to have an amnio. They couldn't schedule the amnio till I was 10 weeks pregnant because there was nothing to find out about the baby other than I was pregnant. So they scheduled the amnio at 10 weeks, and then they did the amnio. And 2 days later, when the cells were growing, they called me and they told me that there was something wrong. They didn't know if it was... The term they used was de novo, if it was new. First of all, I have to say this is all these stories that I tell you all the time are not coincidental. This is why I'm so political, okay? Because of all these things that have happened to me. That's why I'm a crazy Democrat. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. So they called me and they told me that I had to come in. So I went in with my husband and they took our blood and they wanted to see if it was de novo, meaning that if it was a new thing, because my daughter had what they call a balanced translocation. 2 of her chromosomes broke off and attached to other chromosomes when they were forming, and they didn't know if she was going to have anything from a slight learning disability to profound retardation. So during that time, there was no testing. I mean, not much testing. They told me at 15 weeks, I could go in and get a heart study, but not until 15 weeks, because there was nothing to study until 15 weeks. So I had to wait from 10 or 12 weeks to 15 weeks to go in and get an extensive heart study on my daughter to see if there was anything wrong with the heart, because they say a lot of retardation starts from the heart, and if the heart was okay, there was a possibility that she was going to be okay.
Okay.
So while I was doing this, I kept scheduling abortions in different states because I didn't want a profound retarded child. So I think I was all the way out in, like, I don't know, somewhere in, I don't remember, it's 25 years ago, but I remember canceling and making new abortions, and I ended up meeting every genetic specialist in Pennsylvania, and I got up to the guy that trained everybody underneath him, and I sat in the office and I was hysterical crying, and I said, if I was your daughter, what would you do? And they couldn't tell me because of legal issues. So I ended up having her because I had a choice. I had a choice to have her.
Right.
Because I felt she was okay because the extensive heart study came out normal.
And it's also, look,
But,
it's also a choice that people make, that they're, going to deal with having a child who is not typical, that may have, challenges that other kids don't have, which is a perfectly valid choice, obviously, to make.
right. So I asked my husband what he wanted to do, and my husband said, I don't care because it's your baby and you have to take care of it. And at that moment, I decided I was divorcing him, and I got divorced from him a few years later. But that's another story for another day. But I ended up having her, and she came out, and she's perfect. I couldn't look at her the first day. She was like the first couple of hours because I was scared. Then they wanted to put me in like an extensive study for like Balanced Translocation children, and they wanted to look at her every year, like for a year, and do like studies on her. And I did it for like a minute, and then I opted out of it because I didn't want her to be thinking she was not normal. I mean, she's 25 now. She's perfectly normal, and I had a happy ending, and I was prepared to deal with the baby if she wasn't normal because I just was that type of person. But I had a choice, and that's why I am so crazy about this. Now, the other thing I want to add is she didn't have a heartbeat till she was 15 months old because they wouldn't schedule the heartbeat
15 weeks
study
old.
on her.
15 weeks old.
15 weeks. They didn't have the heart. She did not have a heartbeat, or they couldn't give me the study on the heart study. And I remember I had to wait 3 or 4 weeks between the amnio and the heartbeat. Plus, I had to wait till 10 weeks to get the amnio in the first place because there was nothing to find out if there was anything wrong because there was nothing formed.
Right.
Oh, last thing I have to add. Also, it was not my first pregnancy. It was my fourth. That's another story. But anyway, I knew I was pregnant at 4 weeks, and I felt like I was pregnant because I had been pregnant before. And I took a pregnancy test. Now, this was 25 years ago again, but I took a pregnancy test at 4 weeks, and it came up negative, like the whole entire 2 weeks until I was 6 weeks pregnant. So even if you feel like you're pregnant, it might not, I don't know about technology now, but it wasn't showing up then that you were pregnant. And I was walking around, I'm pregnant. And my mother's like, shut the fuck up, you're not pregnant. And I'm like, I'm pregnant. But it's so messed up. This whole abortion thing is so messed up. And it fans out into so many different areas of discussion with this. And then I went on, last thing I'll say about me, I had her at 34, 35. At 39, I had a gigantic fibroid in my stomach, and I had to get a hysterectomy, and I had the hysterectomy. Are they going to stop women from having hysterectomies because then they can't childbear anymore? Like when I got my uterus cut out, I couldn't have babies anymore. Are they going to stop the hysterectomy thing?
I mean, look, that to me, it's hard for me to imagine, but it's not hard for me to imagine that, and they want to make it like if they by criminalizing abortion, they're not really criminalizing abortion, but you're going to have, just like you have with marriage equality, and before marriage equality was legal, you had prosecutors who wanted to make their and local sheriffs and whatnot across the country want to make their hay on, by prosecuting gay people. You're going to have multiple cases in these states where women who have had miscarriages are going to be investigated. And I will tell you that right now. You have a law like you do in Georgia. If you have a law like you do in Ohio, like the one you have in Alabama, obviously, and other states around the country, it's almost guaranteed that if these laws are upheld, I don't know if it'll be 5 years from now, 4 years from now, 3 years from now, there will be women who are sent to jail charged with having an illegal abortion who simply had a miscarriage. And maybe there'll be 2, maybe there'll be 1, maybe there'll be a dozen, maybe there'll be 20, maybe there'll be more. Those are women who just had miscarriages. There'll be women who have abortions. There'll be doctors. They'll be in jail. And all the investigations that will have happened that don't lead to people in jail, all of the regulations that will be required to monitor a woman's pregnancy will be instituted. It will be worse than it was pre-Roe v. Wade. But Mindy,
I was alive in '74. I had an abortion when I was in '77, a clean, safe abortion when I was 18, and I don't have any repercussions from it, but people before me were going to back alleys, and I mean that I knew. I mean, they were using the hanger and all that shit was going on. There was abortion vans that were driving around. They had like these illegal abortion vans where like this van would come. It would be like an operating room in like the truck, and you would have an abortion in the van. I mean, all that stuff for like $300 or something. Now, last thing, what about all these women? Are they going to tell you can't smoke anymore? Like, what about the women that are pregnant that get caught smoking or do heroin or drink?
Or not eating well.
Or what?
Or not eating well.
Yeah, what about if you're promiscuous and you stay up too late and you are partying? What about if you're with Jon Benjamin and you have a threesome?
Right. I mean, there is the door is being opened to, once you exert this type of control over women's biology, the door seems to me to be open to all that. Mindy, I appreciate the call.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks.
That's my story. I have a lot of stories.
I know. I appreciate it. Thank you for calling in.
Thanks.
That's the thing, folks, is that the idea that the zealotry and this is driven, understand, this is driven by a worldview that places women in a very specific role in society. And it's obviously a subjugated role. It's obviously a narrow role. It's one that says that you cannot have sex without getting the repercussions. That's if you're a woman. For a guy, there are none. But this is why, too, they attack birth control. You wouldn't attack birth control if you were concerned about minimizing abortions. You wouldn't attack sex ed if you were concerned about minimizing abortions. It doesn't logically make sense. It does make sense if you believe that women should not be having recreational sex, that women are on this earth to, if not exclusively, primarily be vessels for potential other human beings. And once you say that a woman, that is their primary function, and they don't even have the ability, they don't have the sovereignty of themselves to do more than that and to have the freedom to choose to engage in that. There's no reason to expect that these people are going to be like, okay, abortion's illegal now. Now our job is done. I mean, because this just is just a pillar of what they believe women's role in society is and should be. They will come after birth control pills. They still are. They will come after things like, the morning after pill. If you were concerned about a heartbeat, even though there's no real heartbeat at 6 weeks, but if you were concerned about the baby that you think is there after 6 weeks, then why wouldn't you be handing out the morning after pill?
Well, they want to get it to a place where people can't get abortions or the morning after pill.
Well, but the point is that if their definition of killing a baby is at 6 weeks, why wouldn't you be handing out the abortion pill before that happens the next day?
Morning after pill.
The morning after pill. Why wouldn't you be doing that the next day? This is my point, is that it is not about abortion. It is not about contraception. It is about controlling the sexuality of women, because in their mind, this is the purview of God and man. And I mean specifically man. And so do not be mistaken. This is not where it ends. This is not quite the beginning, but it's not where it ends. Do not believe that. It shouldn't take that realization to motivate people to fight against this. But this is not where it's going to end, folks. This is what we are seeing is symptomatic of a perspective on women and their role in society. This is not the ends. This is just a part of the journey for them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you about all of these factors that are driving this, but I do think for some individuals who consider themselves pro-life, that it is a little more nuanced than that. There are people who have a sincerely held belief that a fetus is a human being and killing it is morally equivalent to killing a fully formed person. And to the degree that people can be persuaded, I think we should be spreading science like our caller just delivered to us, because, there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Right.
The pictures of fetus, quote unquote, aborted fetuses that they often put on those signs at protests are often just their dead babies or their miscarriages. They are not representative of the vast majority of abortions. And for the number of people who have been fed misinformation and might be persuaded by the scientific arguments, we should continue to make them.
Yes. I mean, I think it's absolutely the case that you have different gradations, if you will, of who is driving this, the anti-abortion agenda. There are concentric circles, and that there are people on the outer circles who are not so extreme, ranging from people who personally feel that abortions are wrong but don't want to impose that morality on other people, through the different gradations where people are like, abortions after 20 weeks are wrong, abortions after 25 weeks are wrong, abortions after 15 or 6 weeks are wrong. But the agenda is driven. The people who are driving this, the people who are raising money, the people who are writing the legislation, the people who are leveraging the existence of those people I just mentioned, their agenda goes much further than this. So yes, there's always nuances and variance amongst the coalition of people who are supportive. And that's why you're getting some people who are like, wait, what happens? Women go to jail? Wait a second. No, I don't want that. I just want abortion to be illegal.
This reminds me of a conversation we had on TMBS with Joshua Kahn, and he has the spectrum of allies, and I'll put it up here. Basically, you have active allies, passive allies, neutral, passive opposition, and active opposition. I think in the neutral and passive opposition, it is nice to have that, the science factoid about what's a heart and when does it develop. And then you can move on to the more important conversation, this is not the government's role to be telling women what they should be doing.
And I will say this too, there are the real anti choice people, the real the heart of the matter, the most extremes. Those other people who are, on that spectrum, from there to, people who think that women need to make this choice, they've signed on to this. And, this is one of those things where they don't want to make it to be binary. But the fact of the matter is, there is no doubt there's a lot of gray area here. But if you want to draw a line in the sand and say this is where women don't have control of their bodies, understand that it's the act of drawing the line, not where you draw it, which is where you are casting your lot. And that is the problem. Those people who have a more nuanced perspective, that's all well and good. But this is a political question now. And they're signing on to this larger agenda. They signed up for it. They may not have realized it. Maybe they should have done a little more work, but they have signed up for this agenda. This is where it leads to.
Yep. And I think in much the same way that it's sort of a holy alliance between the crazy racists and the bloodthirsty capitalists on criminalizing migration, it works here too. Like the religious right, who is driven by all these ideas about a woman's place in the world and in society, allies very well, once again, with the people who mostly care about money and their position in the hierarchy. And they know that if poor women, and that's usually who we're talking about, right? Because rich women will always have access to abortion in one way or another. If poor women are deprived agency over their own lives and how many kids they have and when they have them, they're more likely to stay poor, and so will their kids.
I will say this. I think that's largely the case, but across the board, you're talking about a lot more women. If you outlaw abortion, you're talking about a lot more women who are not going to have access than will have access, and it is without a doubt an economic question in terms of a woman's ability to to make money. I mean, the argument that look, women are now forced to carry pregnancies to term. We've got too many people leaving the office. We have too many women who are not committed to their careers. I mean, this is going to happen, A. And B, rich people will have access to abortions. But anything, the fact is that if there are laws in that state that are going to monitor your pregnancy, they're still going to be subject to them. There's going to be doctors who are going to say, the number of doctors who are going to be willing to perform this is going to be, limited because they're going to be risking stuff. I mean, there are going to be people who obviously are going to have access to this. Wealthy people seem to skirt a lot of laws. My understanding is that if you're a billionaire, the whole thing about customs and stuff like that when you come from a foreign country, nope, that doesn't even exist for you.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, I think there's a lot of women who I think this will travel up the economic scale further than most people suspect. All right, listen, we have run out of time, folks. I'm sorry. We got a bunch of callers. I'm going to take some IMs, and then we got to go. My kids have been very, very, very agreeable, but they're going to lose it in a second. JJ Cool, I want to offer some comfort for everyone who's worried about Biden winning the primary. If you recall, there were certain commentators who promised that if Trump won the presidency, we would see a progressive revolution. Nothing can go wrong, folks. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too caught up in that, but I will say that having someone like Biden was probably the safest bet that you would get following Trump, because we saw after Bush for 8 years, we got Obama. Congressional baseball fan. The Majority Report has been a huge part of my life over the years. I just want to say thank you to Sam and the crew for everything you do. Now, for some reason, I'm having Arby's Postmated using a discount code Majority at checkout. Joe Biden has quickly cemented his spot in the lineup for an exhibition game against the Venezuelan national baseball team. Brad Hominum. The sequel to Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village, could be called It Takes More Than Sage. Winnipeg, Craig. Sam, there's pretty strong video evidence circulating that you were in fact a participant in Jon Benjamin's threesome. Now your alibi that John called you about it during the threesome seems suspect, like a cover-up. Pajama Boy. Would those new offerings you were talking about possibly be a Jimmy Dore show on Majority Report, or maybe Michael Tracy taking over for you, Sam? Salvatore, why do you keep giving British fascists like Farage, Sargon, and Robinson airtime for the European election? You haven't shown a single clip from the debates, which would have been much more interesting to your audience. I personally, think the idea that when we give airtime to someone from a different show and reinterpret their performance there and editorialize it, I don't think is the same as basically giving somebody a platform. I mean, we're not doing that. But,
Yeah.
I think there's probably value in us looking at the debates, but I haven't seen any clips from them. They haven't come up on my radar, to be honest. Shield Jaguar, tuned in late. Why is Sam doing his H.H. Goodman impersonation? Doc Naps, hey, I'm our crew. What problems would you foresee if you were to change the Supreme Court to have 4 justices appointed by a Republican and 4 appointed by a Democrat, and any presidential candidate chooses a VP and a Chief Justice as running mates? It's going to take me a while to get my head around that. Jez Gargelet, well, what happens when abortion is banned completely? Will that depress the right-wing turnout? Maybe the strategic move is not to play into the right-wing hands by taking these cases to the Supreme Court, or even let them run their course. When the right wing isn't able to use abortion as a wedge, the issue natural Democratic majority will be able to take over and repeal these cases. I don't think it quite works that way. I don't think it quite works that way. The Chris Lepaco, I think the bodily autonomy argument works much better than the personhood argument. Whether or not a fetus is a person shouldn't even be a factor in the equation. No living person should be legally required to sacrifice their body for another person. Otherwise, fathers could be required to donate organs to their children after birth. If there's no exception for the health of the parent, then that of the father could be required to give up his heart if his child needs it. Nobody would require that kind of sacrifice from men. Same should go for women. No person is entitled to the use of another person's organs.
I like that argument, Lepaco.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Brother from Brooklyn, while I don't like him, de Blasio seems to be better than 75% of the Dems running. On Bill Maher, he said only progressives should run for president and no moderates need apply. We'll play some clips of de Blasio at the beginning of next week. I don't know. People are down on him. But, the biggest thing that I've heard is housing. We've had tremendous cuts to housing across the country from a federal level. That doesn't mean that we can't do more locally.
We actually talk on this week's Antifada about all the bad housing policy that de Blasio has perpetrated on New York City to worsen gentrification.
Folks can check that out. I also personally, I think UPK is completely underestimated in terms of universal pre-K as to how helpful that's been across the board. And, hopefully soon we'll start to see sort of like the data roll in. It's only 2 or 3 years old now, this program, but this is data that will start to crop up, I think, with third graders. MV Scott, Trump says, I'm not a racist. I pardon a black. The DX Fool, hello, proletariats. Disney recently released their movie schedule for next year, including all the stuff acquired from 20th Century Fox, and the Bob's Burger movie is still slated for July 2020. Since only the main cast is listed on IMDb, do you know if you, David Cross, Andy Kindler, Paula Poundstone are still in? Don't know yet. And has Jon Benjamin ever run into Meghan McCain while he was writing for Conan and she was interning for SNL? Not to my knowledge. Why can't Michael Brooks do a voice in his cartoons? Peaches. All right, folks. The final I am of the week. Courier 11. Hi, Sam. I missed the beginning of the show. What's with the max headroom routine? I am on the road at the moment, and that's what we got. All right, folks. See you on Monday. I'll be back.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.